article? Because he's on board with it. And the state asking for Kathy's approval.
Yeah, he should just go through
his email.
invites.
So I sent him.
Go to the icons, like where I have all of that little square of different icons. If you tap on there and see his calendar, go to calendar, and then tap on our meeting, and it should show up. We call the meeting to order? Probably should, huh? All right, guys, it's June 21st at 5 o'clock. I'd like to call the curriculum committee meeting to order. With that, our first order of business is the math applications book adoption. And from there, I'm going to hand it over to Cam and Jason.
Yes, thank you. I'll just get us started and turn it over to our Lincoln friends here. As we know, Lincoln has been working hard towards this journey of standards-based learning. And so a lot of work has gone into really understanding the standards and identifying power standards and supporting standards. And it's through that work that the team said, well, we probably need to start thinking about a new textbook for one of our courses. And we have a kind of an implementation checklist that the team is working really hard to work through. And we're at a point now where we'd be asking the curriculum committee to support next steps. And so me and the team are here to kind of tell us the why, what, and how, and then look for your support for next steps. And so Dana, Steph, and me, thank you for being here. Thank you for your work. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Here for two textbook things. Like the first one's math application. This course designed a few years ago. It originally was an IB course designed to help apply real-world connections to mathematics. We're using it now as a third-year option for our students. Next year we are teaching, how many sections of this? Six sections of students in this class, so it's a popular, basically, choice in our math department. As Jason said, we've gone through the work of really reviewing our standards in relationship to what are the most important ones and how they're relating to the course curriculum. And so in that review process, our team of teachers that are going to be teaching this class next year really wanted to look at the what was out there for textbooks. And so again, I appreciate the Student Learning Office giving us this. Basically, it was kind of cool because they followed the same standard procedures for the financial accounting process as well. But as you'll see, there's an implementation checklist there. It really took us through some important communication pieces, teaming, support, and accountability as we worked this process through. The team met several times to review standards and textbooks. You'll find here that it is really formatted in beginning with talking about why we're looking at a textbook adoption right now. If you go on to the next page, you're going to see our standards reference. These are the standards in the course. You'll see to the right column in the standards that they're either identified as priority or support standards. Our priority standards are what we kind of refer to as our gotta knows. Like these are very much measured by assessments and scores on those assessments that relate into whether the students earn their proficiency score on those standards. If you skip on to the next page, you'll see there's more standards listed there. But then we get into really looking at the textbook piece. And our team had listed some criteria that they were looking for, particularly in referencing their book that they wanted to. They have some vision statements. They wanted something with responsive teaching. They wanted something that was coherent and connected. They wanted something that had access and engagement, and something that had problem-solving, understanding, reasoning, and sense-making. They also listed some other considerations that they were looking for in the textbook. Following that on page 4 are a list of 3 other textbooks that they took a look at outside of the one that we have here today. The book looks like this, in case you're interested. It's just kind of looks like a soft cover book, which really does drag down the price, so that's a cheaper book to buy with the soft cover. But As you'll see on page 5, they do have a section there called Define My Pick. The book that they actually chose to go with was a book that we already used for this course. It's just a new edition of the book. So really, it's just updating an older edition of this textbook that we have here this afternoon. Looking at specifically the whys, it aligns best with the instructional practices for the DPI and the standards that are taught in the course as it relates to comparing it with the other choices that they had. They also, on the bottom of page 5, do a comparison to mathematic core topics and standard level between Algebra 2 and the Math Applications course, so that everyone can kind of see where those courses overlap. And so that was the work of this committee, and our textbook adoption committee, that now makes it to your committee for your consideration. So we'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have about our mathematics core topics SL1 book.
I think it's just important to note that, I think that you might have not said it, but just a reminder that a traditional pathway for our high school students would be algebra, geometry, and then algebra 2. And so this is a third option for students that don't want to take algebra 2. So that's that third year, I think it's referenced somewhere.
Yeah.
The additional criteria, I think is just an important reminder.
Yeah. We covered on that earlier in the year. We saw some of that those different pathways.
Yes, yes.
One of my questions is just what is different between our old version versus this new version? You know, what differences did you find?
I will be honest, I did not look at the old version, but it seems 2019, IB had updated this class, Math Applications, so this book just kind of fell in with their new updates.
So they update their curriculum every few years.
Yeah.
And so in this course, the topics were updated, therefore the book was updated.
Oh, okay. So we have the book before that? So how old was our book before? Since IB came into fruition?
No, probably with the adoption of this course, I'm guessing 3 or 4 years old. And it'll be important to note, like, we don't buy books for every kid, so there's classroom sets that we buy.
Oh.
And then there are materials that are used in resources kind of outside of the course. So it's not in the days of, 20 years ago when we would have come forth with a U.S. history book that cost $150 a piece that we needed 300 or 400 of. What are we looking for? 2 classroom sets, I believe 60 books, and these are relatively inexpensive.
Not to push forward, but if you look at page 6, there's some suggested or what we believe are next steps.
Okay.
And so we're really, that first box there, this is where we're at right now, right? We're recommending that we move forward and move forward in the next box. We would allow this book to be available to our public, board, of our district to review. And then we would bring this forward during our next meeting, so that would be July 19th. Then it would be, we would hope that we would make the recommendation to the full board. And then we would move towards purchasing 2 classroom sets, as Mr. Pettis mentioned, about $1,800 for the split the cost between Lincoln High School budget and the student learning budget, so we split it. And then we, the bottom, that last bullet really puts us back to our implementation guide. Talks about the team working to create accountability checklists, a scope and sequence. So that's bringing us back to where we started.
Are there any other questions? Did we get Tony on?
He's trying to
Trying.
communicate with me. He said he can't get in that email. But for this purpose of business, thank you very much. Looks like pretty straightforward. The only thing that I would maybe ask is that we could put it digitally online or have it available.
Review?
Yeah, but I mean, all this looks great.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is there a digital option online for?
Yeah, so not for licensing purposes, you know what I mean? If you do digital copies of anything, they want license fees for everything. So this would be the only one we really have right now, is the one that we got to review, so.
Okay.
Maybe we could work on it. That's not this, but I mean, we could work on trying to get it posted so that instead of a 30-day window for the community, it's a little more, you can see it. But
Yeah, I had suggested, too, that, so we used to keep it in the SLO office, which is back within the building, and I said, well, maybe we could put it up front behind Jody, so that when people come in, they can sit in the front, and just actually make a point of saying, here it is, and making it really available for people. That would help. It doesn't do exactly what you're thinking of.
It's not gonna do us justice.
But at least it's visible, and people can see we're adopting a new book, even if they didn't want to see it, you know, just that we're in the works of that. So that's, I think, even part of, I hate using the transparency piece, but it really is about saying, like, here's something we're doing. So maybe, I think we should consider doing that. I don't think it can hurt unless you guys need it that by you.
No,
Um,
just have to.
It just seems like a great thing to put a little shelf there with the book and a little display to make a big deal out of
Maybe a
it.
notification online, so. That'd be good.
That's a
On
good
our
point.
website.
Great, yeah, that's
That
a
I would
good
like to
idea.
add.
Okay. I mean, I know it'll be in our notes, but not everyone reads our notes, so like maybe just putting something on the website or something like that. Okay, that's a great idea. All right, so I guess at this point, we still don't have Tony, do we?
Did he come on now?
Just re-emailed him, or resent it and sent the email.
Okay. I really don't anticipate a lot of questions from Tony.
Maybe we
on
could
this
jump
either.
ahead and then you could come back for the vote. if you want.
I'd like to vote just because I think these guys would like to get out of here. Do you think it would matter that much?
I can vote. That's.
Right, it'd be the two of us, so I just don't foresee an issue with Tony not, saying no. So I guess at this point, I'd like to hear a motion then about moving forward with the adoption process of the map applications book.
I make a motion.
I have to second, so all in favor? All in favor, aye, all right. I believe there's no discussion, so with that, we'll move forward. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Very silly when we only have two people
Yeah,
here,
well,
but
absolutely.
it's good seeing you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, nice seeing you too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
So, my team's leaving, so now I have to fly solo on the accounting one, but I'll try to make it.
I think we'll be okay.
Thanks, team.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll just set us up again, right? Same process, right? And so, we have phenomenal, business department. And through that process of moving towards standards-based learning, this comes up again, right? And so this team has been following much of what you heard from mathematics and following the same implementation checklist. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Pettis again for some of the details.
Yeah.
Same process, though.
Yeah, same process is used. I'd say the biggest piece here is that we really partner with LTC on several courses. One very strong foundational one is our accounting curriculum. So in order for our kids to earn the transcripted credit that they will receive as a result of taking our course at our school, we have to be closely aligned with them. And so in a recent, partly with this new standards piece, but also partly looking at, we have to give them our syllabus and things each year. And they use this series for their text. So this is really an effort to align more closely with the, I don't know, I guess the word is the one sort of transcripting our kids the college credit for the course. We also did research to find that NWTC also uses this text and this curriculum. And our new business from also has used this book and is familiar with it as well. So this particular book, as you'll see from the paperwork, there's a few core standards that they have listed here in this particular document that did our math folks. But when you get to the end, they did the same process. They did look at several other textbooks that were accounting textbooks and came to the conclusion that this one, because of its use at LTC, would make the most sense. Just also to note, in conversations with LTC, you may notice in our paperwork that this is indeed the 16th edition of the book. They're using the 15th, but have told us we'll be very soon going to 16th. And we don't buy textbooks or update ours near as often as they do. So they just kind of want to be ahead on that front. to make sure that they'll be aligning with them for years to come. And I know you asked this about the math textbook. It's been a long time since we've looked at accounting textbook. I know for sure not since I've been at Lincoln for the last 5 years, so it's been well before that we've had any type of adoption in our business ed department, let alone accounting. So it's definitely due.
I think it's great that you're aligning with LTC and that WTC is using it. There may be students who choose to go there too. And you said even Green Bay has, people who are familiar with it. So it's obviously a well-known and well-received textbook. So that's good news. I would be just automatically in support of that. I think that just supports our kids moving forward with being college ready, right? Is that whole thing we're trying to accomplish. So do you have any questions, Sophie?
Can you walk me through the procedure of how they're gonna get LTC credits for
Sure.
accounting one, just to clarify?
Yeah, so our transcripted credit program, it works basically that our curriculum is aligned to a certain point with theirs, that they're comfortable issuing our students transcripted credit. It doesn't cost them anything necessarily because they're not teaching the course, we are. So basically, some courses that we offer this way, Mr. Phipps, are sociology, psychology, I want to say accounting. We have, those are some of the types of courses that we have through transcripted credit. Now, the biggest difference is this. There's something that you'll hear sometimes called advanced standing. That's different than transcripted credit. Transcripted credit means that if I went to LTC, that's going to be credit that I have earned already. Advanced standing essentially is a little bit different, and it just basically means that you took the course and you'll have advanced standing in that area, and not necessarily credits transcripted to you. So you still have to earn the credits
So
on those.
to clarify, so if I take accounting one
Yep.
at Lincoln High School and I get a B or above, or is it?
Yeah, I want to say it is
Because
a
I
B.
remember
Yep.
looking at the rubric
Yep.
myself.
Yep.
Then when they would apply into a program at LTC, they would get credit for that in the accounting one.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Tony, hello, welcome. Do you have any questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, I'd like to hear a motion then for adopting the accounting one book and moving forward with that to the full board.
I would make a motion to accept accounting one textbook.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you guys. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, with that, we will proceed with the adoption steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I have a note that we'll make those books available in the main office, and we'll make a note on the website.
Great, and
Thank
just
you.
so people hear us even more, both of those books will be available for 30 days then for your public viewing before we move further ahead on this and bring it back to curriculum.
You sure you don't want to stay?
Well, I'll stay for a little.
I just
All right, moment here, leave here. All right. I prepped this beforehand.
I can keep
All right.
going. Just do this
Yeah,
real
our
quick.
next one is, the Kids at Hope Masters, the 2022 out-of-state travel. And we have someone who would like to go do that, and needs our approval to follow through. So,
Yes. Great. And so just a reminder, this is the same opportunity here at the last curriculum committee when Lynette Similar was with us with safety learning. And we received this proposal from Kristen Lee. She's out of the district right now, so she wasn't able to join us this evening. But as you can read here, she's been not only invited to join this opportunity, but she's been invited to present. And so we have a member of our learning community that's been invited to present at this Kids at Hope Masters Institute. And again, that's in Phoenix, Arizona, in September. And similar to what we heard last time, all expenses are covered by the Manitowoc County Department of Human Services. And Kristen Lee as again was invited to do this in the spring of 2020, but they canceled the event. So they remain committed to Kristen Lee and her message. And as we heard earlier, last month, it's really a community piece. And so we were asked for support for Kristen Lee to travel to Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay. First, I'd like to say congratulations to Kristen to be, and we're really honored to have someone in our district who actually goes to speak at a national level. I think that's really exciting. So if I could please ask for a motion to send Kristen Lee to the Hope Masters in Arizona, paid for through other venues as no expense to our district. I would be seeking that.
I'll make a motion to accept the invitation for her to go to the Hope Masters program. Kristen Lee is the person. Any more details is good to know.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. That's all good. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tony. And all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, and we'll have this as new business for the next full board.
Okay.
We'll see that.
I didn't hear Tony say aye, so.
Aye, sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Tony, I didn't hear you. Thank you.
Yep.
This is the only time that I don't have to say it. Names. Okay. Sometimes I think I don't do this the right way, so I'm not very quick about it, but we get it done. Okay, our next order of business is AGR, which is the Achievement Gap Reduction, which is a requirement to go through, I believe, twice a year. So Pam and Jason will be going that through that with us.
Because this is the first time that Matthew and Tony, you have kind of gone through this, I've gotten kind of an introduction to Achievement Gap Reduction, EGR. I wanted to provide you with a little bit more information about the program. And so that first sheet that was in board book for you just gives an overview of it. You may hear folks, when you talk about AGR, some folks may say, is that the same thing as something that's called SAGE from years back? And yes, it is. But what happened was they replaced that SAGE program with Achievement Gap Reduction program. And then at some point just kind of said any schools that were eligible at the time where they just kind of capped it will continue, but no new schools can be eligible. So at the time that occurred, Franklin and Jefferson were our two elementary schools that qualified for that. And it's based on the low income numbers in our schools. So that's how they originally got involved in that. Basically what that means is that we receive some funding, and part of our obligation for that funding is to do a couple of things. First of all, we have to provide some type of intervention for students in those schools. And the three categories of interventions are one-to-one tutoring, small class sizes, or instructional coaching. For a few years, we did small class sizes. And one of the things that we found is that we ran into some issues when we staff at the beginning of the year. And we have to keep it to 18 to 1. So we would staff and we would keep it to 18 to 1, and then we'd have an influx of students and we'd be at 19 to 1 or 20 to 1. And then what the state would, or what the system would say is, now you have to put something else in place. Well, something else we weren't prepared for because we didn't have that kind of option. So what we have said is we are going to commit to using those funds to help get some instructional coaches. So math coaches and our reading teachers serving as those coaching roles, utilize that service and then still try to keep the class sizes small. So at both of those schools, we try to keep the kindergarten and first grade numbers closer to that 18 to 1 ratio. And then at second and third grade, keeping it about somewhere between 19 and 20 to 1. So just still trying to keep it small, keep it lower, but not meeting necessarily and guaranteeing we're going to keep that 18 to 1 ratio.
The whole school?
Just kindergarten through third grade.
Or third was
It's only K3. Yep, K3.
That's
So just so you have that history, there. We just, several years in a row, ran into an issue where in the middle of the year, we were all of a sudden trying to, regroup and figure out how we were gonna provide some additional support because we were no longer able to keep that 18-1.
What were we at this year, 20-1?
Right now, I think we're in those 18-1 ranges in K1. And then I think we may have gotten to 2021 at the 2-3 grade level.
Are you thinking about revisiting that plan strategy because of enrollment or enrollment?
No, I think we're trying to keep it kindergarten at that lower level, that 18-1 as much as
No,
possible.
I'm saying, because you said we're a little above the 20 or 18-1, so now we have the tutors and the math and the reading specialists.
Yeah,
Are we really close, or how far off?
we're pretty close, but the challenge is we're trying to anticipate that we're gonna have enough students coming in. Both of those schools we do see typically over the course of the year, students move in.
Okay.
And so just as a backup plan, we're saying, okay, we're gonna make sure we have the coaching. That's gonna be a given, and that's what we'll report to the state. But we still want to make sure as a backup, we are trying to keep those class sizes smaller as well,
Thank you.
if that makes sense.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
So,
I have a couple questions. I
Yeah.
know, before we head into the data, so one, why are other schools no longer involved, like able to get this? Like you said, we have Franklin and Jefferson, but they're not accepting any additional schools. So why are they doing it? Are they just trying to cap the amount of dollars? We don't know.
I don't know.
I didn't know if you knew that or not. And then the other is when we have the instructional coaching, so for math or reading, how often do the kids see those people? Like, how does that actually work within the classroom?
It works, I think it depends, right? I think that they support the teachers to support the students. That's what instructional coaching is. So if there is a need for them to be in the classroom to help model and demonstrate strategies, they are. In many cases, and you'll see some of that referenced in their documents, they'll talk about how the coaches are working with the teachers to look at data and plan interventions during some of those collaborative conversations, so that they're maybe not in there working with the students, but they're in there helping the teacher kind of plan for how am I going to meet the needs of.
So they're not actually necessarily working directly with the students, like for pullouts or anything like that?
The reading is a little bit different because some of the reading teachers work with our highest need students. When we talk about tier 3 intervention, they
Okay.
do. Math coaches do not. Math coaches don't have an intervention role with the students. And so they're working with the teachers to help plan for that, and we've asked our reading teachers also to help work in that capacity to help plan for some of those interventions and supports, so that in the classroom in general, if students have a need, that they're intervening quickly on those.
So why do we do that for reading and not for math? What's the difference?
It's just the way that the role of the reading teachers is structured. It's historically, we've had kind of that system where at some point when those strategies within the classroom aren't meeting the students' needs and they need additional adults, usually it's to try to see if there is something that can be impacted to move the student forward, so that we don't have to move to looking at a special education identification. The reading teachers will get involved at that level with the highest need students. The hard part about that, in all honesty, Kathy, is that we have to work with our teachers because we don't have enough of those folks to really do what we would anticipate would be to meet the level of needs. We've had situations where they're at capacity and they just don't have enough time in their day, and we don't have the ability to add more. So this is kind of that balance to say, let's work in the classroom and help the teachers identify some things that they can work on with students, and then they'll take some of those highest need students in their classroom. And when our math coaches were hired, they were hired as coaches and not hired as interventions.
To follow up with that, so they are licensed teachers that are considered coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And then how many staff members between reading and math at these two facilities would that account for?
Right now, we have 2 reading teachers at each building, and then we have a math coach at Jefferson, and we had a math coach at Franklin, and we hadn't been able to hire one this past year. So in the course of this year, what we did was we put together a few people that kind of worked together. So we had someone from Seizure who was working, we hired an interim person to work with, and then Lori Williams, our math specialist for the district also.
And now we get, now maybe this is skipping ahead, but that's what these numbers are below here with the 5-year trend. We receive those funds then to work with those 2 schools. So we're receiving, that's what we're receiving in order to run those programs, that extra help.
To have the extra support.
On this one?
Okay,
Yes, at the bottom there, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an indication of what the funds are that we receive for 8 through AGR. I can't speak to where everything goes, because that's Angela would know a little bit more about that, she navigates that, but we draw our math coaches from here, and then some of our and it also to keep those class sizes small. So if we're going to keep an 18-to-1 ratio at kindergarten and first grade, in order to do that, we would add more staff at these buildings than we would at another elementary.
Which we are doing.
Right, we are doing. So some of those people come out of this fund as well.
And do we anticipate like AGR going away at any time soon? Okay, so that's good news.
No, both buildings just did their 5-year renewal, so there's a 5-year contract.
Okay.
And so they just did that last year. So when they do the 5-year renewal, they kind of set some objectives. And achievement gap reduction is really about looking at and using data to determine which students have the gaps and then developing a plan to address that. And it's annually that they will do that. So at the start of their 5-year contract, they set some goals, and then every year moving forward, they just kind of review that based upon those summer data dates. And then they will, at the beginning of the year, put those goals into place, collect a little bit more baseline data, and then usually closer to the end of the semester, a little bit after, once they've collected first semester data, they'll report to the board on how it's going mid-year, and then this is the end of the year report.
Yeah, great, thank you.
So to summarize, in your professional opinions, do you think that the literacy and math's doing good at these 2 facilities because of the almost $1 million that we are receiving?
I think what I would say is that we have evidence that there are some growth, and we have evidence that there are some areas where these schools still need to target populations of students. So if you look at, they set their targets, and they set the way that they're going to assess those things. And so Franklin and Jefferson approached it a little bit differently. Franklin which is the first report that you have, I'll just kind of summarize how they approached it. What Franklin did was look at, start of the year, some data collection that they did. They looked at which students were not performing at proficiency on those baseline data, we call it. And then they said, we want to move that group of students forward and try to get those students to proficiency. And they said, if we can take, which is a smaller group of students, if we can take and get at least 50% of those students to proficiency, we feel like we're going to be successful. So they did some of that. Yep, Tony?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to add that I had the opportunity to visit Jefferson, and I had a chance to see the math coach, actually a math class in action, and I was pretty impressed with what I saw. What I would like to see going forward, just to add on to what Matt was saying, is if there's a way to just track the measurable gains that we're getting with these coaches. I think that would be great, because it seems like a good idea, but I guess I just wanted to make sure that we had something in place to actually see, how do we know that it's working, right? Basically. And I think one good indicator, just from my seat, would be the testing proficiencies, right? If we could see improvements there, that'd be a huge step.
I think, yes, and I would add to that, Tony. I think it's also how the teachers are feeling in terms of their capacity to support student needs. Do they have more tools in their toolbox because they have someone else there to kind of brainstorm with, to plan with, how to meet all of those individual needs. And so that's the benefit of those folks really being able to dig in and help with that in the classroom.
I think we also, when we think about data, we think about looking at one picture. You know, if we take a picture of this room now, we can make some hypotheses. But if we look at a lot of pictures of a photo album of every board meeting, we get a pretty clear picture. So we want to look at multiple data sets to really get that picture. And Tony, I know you were at the Jefferson Math Night, for example. That is a data set, right? The number of parents that engage in those family nights and come out and learn more about math and engage in those activities. And we want to have some academic measures, like you said. Standardized tests are one of them. AGR report is another. Our classroom data sets is another. As Pam said, how our teachers are growing in their capacity to really rock it in the classroom. That's another data set. But we like to look at multiple data sets.
And I think, you know, with Franklin and Jefferson, Franklin looked at that growth of the target population, and they looked at how many of those students were actually moving. And one of the things with achievement gap that's a little bit more of a challenge is within that, those students who have the gap, some of them have a very large gap. And so it's like if you think about running a race, right? The students are not all starting at the same spot and having to get to the same finish line. So Kathy, who's on track, may start here. I, who am way off track, may start at the back wall there. We both have to get to the finish line at the same time. And that's what we're dealing with when we look at some of those statewide measures, and that's why Jason said there's gotta be multiple sets, because if I'm growing, I'm closing a gap, but I'm not necessarily where I ultimately need to be. It's gonna take me longer to get there than it will to take Kathy. So we just have to kind of look at some of those pictures as well. Tony?
Yeah, thanks for that color there, Pam. I agree with a lot of what you said, and I think this could be something that we could work with Jim on, you know, in that strategic plan, just looking at some of our own internal measures and how do we develop those, you know, because I agree. I don't think the state measures are everything. I have a lot of questions about those myself, but I think it would be great if, as a district, that we could come up with, you know, what are the important ones that aren't being measured by the state, and just make sure that we're measuring something that's going to lead to the improvement that we all want. So thank you.
Absolutely. And then Jefferson, I just wanted to note on theirs, one of the things that they saw, they focused, both schools really set their goals around math this year because they were really trying to impact, in particular, the English learner group in math. And so they had a lot of full staff time spent on talking about how to engage language development within math. So when they looked at their data, they saw that, you know, in the literacy area, there's still some need to continue to focus and to continue to grow that. One of the things that they did notice, however, was when they looked at a cohort group, so that last page of the Jefferson piece is giving you kindergarten students who were kindergarten last year, where they ended the year in terms of proficiency, and how they now are performing on those skills in first grade. So if you look at kindergarten 2021, on letters, they ended the year at 34%. Now, when they're first graders, they're 90% proficient. Last year in lowercase sounds, they were at 35% of those students were proficient. Now 73% of them are proficient. So they wanted to look at students compared to themselves versus kindergartners, different groups of kindergartners compared to each other. And so that was just another data set that Jefferson wanted to put forth so that you could take a look and see how those cohorts, even though last year was a struggle for some of those kids, they are seeing that some of those gaps are closed.
If I remember correctly too, they had a huge goal this year, that they have it
90%,
100%.
80%, and so, and they met it in some cases, but yeah, that was a pretty lofty, and I asked the building leader, wow, and she said, we need to shoot for the stars, right? We need to get as many students there as possible. One of the other things that she asked me to mention to you is that in 21-22, they focused on the operations and algebraic thinking standards. And that was their focus for their goal. And one of the things, and they saw some growth in that, but one of the things that they've seen and the data shows here is that the number in operations and base 10 standards were lower for all grade levels. And so that'll be something that they'll take a look at as they look at their data for next year. So they're using this in addition to some of those other data sets to be able to say, okay, what else can we do to help really set a goal that's going to continue to move our students forward? And then there's a piece in there I just wanted to point out to you, so, and that won't go over it all, but in Jefferson, the chart that kind of gives you a little bit of some of their strategies, that's all from the teachers. She just asked her teachers, can you tell us some things that you did in the classroom specifically, or as a team specifically, to help affect some change in the student data? And so that list is there for you to check in on.
What I noticed too at Jefferson, I didn't look through all the Franklin's just now, but you have quite a few that you've yellow marked about something like real achievement and things like open syllables, 94% proficiency. I mean, like there's a number of those. So congratulations to Jefferson on achieving those things, and to the students who actually did the actual achievements.
And I can say that in both schools, teams were looking at that, those data sets, and they were passionate about, we want to make some change. We want to do some things to help move these students forward. And that's what we're seeing is that impact. And when they felt as though students weren't growing at the pace that they wanted to, they were asking questions about why. How can we help? How can we work together to move forward? And so kudos to our staff always on the work that they do.
I remember them being very passionate about what they were doing last year. They came to talk to us. So one of the things that I remember at least. So yeah. All right. Is that it for HER? Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much for the information.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. There's lots to look at here for sure. I'll look forward to seeing more of those yellow marks and paying attention to them. All right, so we're doing all right, you guys. We're only 45 minutes into this, that's not too bad. And we are on to the policy section. So we have 5 policies to discuss today. And Tony, I'm sorry you're not here, that we don't get the hard copies, because it's a lot easier to read. But Pam and Jason were good enough to give us our current policies with those that Neola is putting out, like their newest version of those policies. So I don't know if you've had any time to do any kind of comparison. Sometimes that's hard when you're just doing it online. But let's start with I believe we're starting with technology resources and other electronic equipment.
Can I just mention for Matthew and Tony, so when Kathy was mentioning and reaching out about these policies, we took a look at 5518 as our current policy. And so we went in search of 5518 with Neola for the new, and couldn't find it because this policy no longer exists in Neola. So what found out was that 5136 replaces it. And then today I found out that there's a 5136.01. So you have both, and basically what it is these in conjunction with each other make up what was 5518. So that's why there's a discrepancy just with that policy in the numbering.
I think it's also important to note, like Pam, is that a couple highlights here. Looking at the 5136, the Neola template. So I'll just walk us through just so we're all on the same page of what we're seeing and reading. First of all, we have 4 policies that are being recommended for review from the Behavior Ad Hoc So
Yeah,
that-
sorry, I should have said that.
4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
Yep. And so the goal is for us to have these approved by the board, the full board, before the start of the school year.
Yes.
And so the process that we've navigated in the past is that we bring the first kind of read, review, suggested revisions to the curriculum committee. It would go to the full board, June 26th, next Tuesday, thank you, for the first read, and then the next board meeting, which I believe is July 12th, would be, we'd seek official approval from the full board. So that's kind of the process that we follow. If we look at the,
Oh, I was just saying, along with that too, then, I looked into that a little further. Once we have approved all these things, we send our approvals out to Neola and they download it to our website, just so you guys know.
yeah, like, so a little bit about the templates, right? So I'm gonna look at 5136 Neola template and just kind of just walk us through how to read this. And so this one is unique. It's kind of more unique and more layered than disorderly conduct, for example. And so I say that because they provide us, Neola provides us, several options for us to consider, right? So you'll see on the first page, there's an option A, end of option A, option B, end of option B, and so on and so forth. And at the top of page 2 on the hard copies, signified there or denoted the end of option D. And the rest of this policy template is the body of the template, if that makes sense. So we really have some choices on option A, B, C, or D. We also, as a team, have some options denoted within the body of this template by open brackets and open parentheses. And so just for following along and understanding purposes, if you look at option C, for example, there's an open bracket there. That is a spot that we can make a decision on whether we support that language. Later in that first sentence, there's an open parenthesis. That's another spot where we have a decision to make. And in the second paragraph, open bracket, open parenthesis. So where you see those are spots where we have decisions to make. So that's the multi-layeredness, especially of this one, right?
Yeah.
Options A, B, C, D, open bracket, open parenthesis.
Right.
This one is a tougher one. These two are tougher as far as layers are than disorderly conduct. So we'll have to navigate. And again, following suit, we'll get to the body of it, the meat of it, but if you look at 5136.01, I don't know why they don't just follow option A and B. Here they confuse us by saying option 1,
Yeah.
option 2A, option 2B, option 3, option 4, option 5. Again, following the same, they do stay the same procedure with open brackets and open quotes.
I think you should give your suggestions, Neola.
Thank you. So just any questions,
Consistency is good.
yeah, any questions about kind of the process or the formatting of the policies before we start?
I have a quick question. Kathy, are these, are those Neola policies on the agenda? Are those the ones that you sent in the email for us to review, or did you send us the ones that were the older ones?
No, I sent you the new ones,
Okay,
the ones that I received from Neola,
okay.
not the old policies, because those you could have just looked up on the MPSC website, because those are already posted,
Right.
so, yeah.
Tony, just for clarification, just if you could follow along with Pam, the only ones that aren't aligned by numerics is this first one, right? So if you're looking on the website, the likened policy would be 5518. There is no longer a policy 5518 because we are, 13 years removed from that. And so the policies that align are 5136, 5136.01, every other policy we will talk about tonight are perfectly aligned by number.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Is that
Got it.
fair? You, Tony?
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions about the process or the templates?
No, I think, so what I'm assuming will happen here too is as we go along, especially this one, the others are not nearly as complicated. We will have to choose what we want to include in them. And Pam and Jason will check the boxes that we want to include, and then that will be forwarded to the full board.
Thank you. And so what we expect, what we are planning to do is when we present to the full board, we would provide the full board the current state of the union, right? The current policy as listed on our website, a blank, the template as we see it here, and then the suggested policy as this team works through.
Forward, yeah, okay.
So let's see how.
All right, so should we start diving in? And actually, I would like to suggest, we kind of have it flipped here, but that we actually go to the cell phone policy first, because it is the 5136, and add 5136.01 onto it, because I feel as though our cell phone policy is kind of the basis, the basic policy. Do you see an issue with doing that?
Are you suggesting doing 5136 first?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be okay. All right, so that's all right with you guys? Does anyone object to that at all? Tony or Matthew?
It's fine.
Okay, so the one we will talk about right now is 5136, and it is the personal communication devices. Again, just for clarification, it is not 5518, which is the downloaded old version on our NPSC website. This is the new version being offered by Neola, which I'm sure is broken down because we have so many new devices in the last 13 years. So it needed to be addressed that way. How should we proceed with this? Oh, Matthew.
I would suggest, Jason, if he doesn't mind, you can read it line by line. We can go through it and then we can talk about each one. I know it's a little cumbersome, but
Or do you want me to read it?
whoever wants to.
I can start. Maybe I'll hand it over to you.
All right,
I'm supposed to
I
read.
think they call that popcorn.
I'll pop it.
Popcorn reading.
I'll pop it over to you.
Yeah.
All right. We'll tag it off. I'll just comment. Okay. All right. So we have 5136, personal communication devices. Personal communication devices, or PCDs, as used in this policy, are defined in bylaw 0100. Drafting note. We are to select option A, or option B, or option C, or option D. Option A is while students may possess PCDs in school, on school property, during after-school activities, such as extracurricular activities, and at school-related functions, they must be powered completely off, not just placed into vibrate or silent mode, and stored out of sight during school hours. The options also include here are during after-school activities, in other words, extracurricular activities, and on school buses or other board-approved vehicles. The next part. However, technology including but not limited to PCDs intended and actually used for instructional purposes, as in taking notes, recording classroom lectures, writing papers, will be permitted as approved by the classroom teacher or the building principal. An option is the use of PCD to engage in non-education-related communications is expressly prohibited. Sorry. Do we want to read all of them, or should we tackle this first?
I think we have to make a decision, I believe, which option first, A, B, C, D, and then dive into the open bracket or
Okay.
open parenthesis under each option.
Okay. So are we clear with that option A, and what that means?
Yeah, why don't you put it in layman's terms, I guess.
Put it in layman's terms. Okay, basically, option A, I believe, and correct me if anyone sees it differently, please. Option A is basically students can come to schools with their cell phones, but they need to be completely off. No vibrations, no silent mode. And then we have the options then to decide if that would include the after-school activities or on the school buses or any other board-provided vehicles. So that's very cut and dry. The second part of that was actually, can they use that technology, meaning cell phones, we're strictly talking cell phones right now, or PCD, for purposes of instruction, such as taking notes, the recording of the lectures, so forth and so on. An option was whether or not they could use that in the non-education related communications, and if we prohibit that. Does that make sense? I still feel like it's very wordy.
So the way I'm understanding it is no cell phones on, but they can possess them. However, if the teacher or the principal approves it, they can have them for educational purposes. Would everybody agree with that statement?
That's what that
That's
one is saying.
the summary of that
Yes.
statement?
So far,
Mhm.
but let's see what our other options
Yep,
are, right?
sounds
So
good.
let's just say no cells, I'm gonna make my own notes on the side here, no cell phones at all, except, right?
Yep, except teacher or
Except
principal.
teacher, yeah, I'm just gonna teacher, I'll know what I mean. Okay,
And that should clarify, because I think there's some scanning the next one. That's like all day long.
Yep.
That's the rule, all day long.
all day, yeah. All day, good point. All right, Tony, do you have any questions with that one? Then we can go to option B.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I guess my only comment on that one is, how do they know if they're using them for those agreed upon purposes, right?
Yeah.
That'd be the only concern I would have, but.
Yeah, but right now we can't really, I mean, we're not determining that right now. We're just,
I know, yeah, I'm just,
so yeah, I mean, that could be addressed like with leadership at a different point in time. So, but it gives them something to fall back on either way. When we make the policy, they know what they have to abide by. So option
I
B-
understand. Yeah, I'm just suggesting that we think through potential unintended consequences. That's all.
Gotcha. Okay, so option B is students may use the PCDs before and after school, during their lunch break, between classes, as long as they do not create a distraction, disruption, or otherwise interfere with the educational environment, during after-school activities, meaning extracurricular activities, at school-related functions. The use of PCDs, let's just take cell phones, I think it's so much easier than the acronym. Cell phones, except as approved by a teacher or administrator at another time, is prohibited and must be powered completely off, not just placed into vibrate or silent mode again and start out of sight. They also have the second part of this, which is, however, technology, including but not limited to cell phones intended and actually used for instructional purposes, same thing as the other part. It's really the same as option A, right? So this is saying like, okay, everything during instructional time, they're completely off. But we would allow it during lunch, in between classes, before and after school, that type of thing. So that is, I think, the distinction between those two. Anyone see it different? Okay, so I'm just put like, I'll put breaks in my notes. All right, option C is in order to avoid disruption of the educational environment and protect student rights of privacy, student use of cell phones is prohibited on school grounds during school hours, after school activities, and on school buses. Those are our options. And then again, the cell phones intended and actually used for instructional purposes, such as taking notes, recording classroom lectures, writing papers, will be permitted as approved by the classroom teacher or building principal. An option with that was the use of cell phones to engage in non-education related communications is expressly prohibited. So the other same thing. So not a whole lot different. How do you guys see this one being different? I mean, this is essentially, I think, the same, but it talks about protecting students' right of privacy. Does anyone else see it as a different? To me, it reads very, very similar as to option A.
Yeah, I think
But it includes the privacy part.
that, and it includes the disruption to educational learning. So it talks a little bit about the why of it.
Yeah.
If some of the options are really about the verbiage versus
Difference.
right.
addressing the student.
Okay, so this is all right. Any questions so far, guys? All right, let's go to D. Students may not possess telephone paging devices. Oh, this is weird. By the way, paging devices is part of, hang on a second, because I was pretty sure I read this in 513601, pagers. Yeah, just so you know, the paging devices is included in 5136.01. So I don't know why this would say it, but we'll keep going. Students may not possess telephone paging devices, beepers or pagers, on the school grounds at school-sponsored events and on school buses or other board-approved vehicles. Students may not use PCDs during the school day while on property, during after-school activities, for example, extracurricular activities. When use of PCDs is prohibited, the devices must be powered completely off, not just placed in vibrate or silent mode, and stored out of sight. Yeah.
Really the end of the option.
That is the end of the option. So the rest was, we do have some options within the body, but these are the basic options of the cell phone use. So what are your opinions out of those four that you feel as though would be most appropriate for our school? I can tell you right now, I would like to rule out option D.
I would agree with that.
Was that D as in dog? Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay with ruling that one out.
Yeah, it doesn't seem as clearly defined to me as the others do, and that would be mostly my reason for that. Okay, so let's say for now at least, and we can always revisit it if we need to, let's rule out option B. Okay. What do you guys think about options A, B, and C? Is there a preference? What do you see as the differences? I guess I think option, well, I'm asking you.
You can go.
Okay, I'm just thinking like option B, I would not have an issue with students using them on their break times, their lunch times. I think to just put an end to all cell phone usage for that whole time period during the day. One, I don't think it's very practical. I think we would have a lot of pushback. And I think that students and just people, not just students, but adults, we've all become so reliant on our cell phones that at some point in time, we may need to allow some of that communication to happen. But it's during the instructional time that I'm most concerned for. Like lunches, that's their lunch. I don't want to dictate how they communicate during their lunchtime, as long as it's appropriate, right? It still doesn't allow for, you still have bullying and harassing and all those kinds of things in place. So I think allowing those students that freedom during break time, I think would be important. But that's just how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I agree with you, almost pretty much 100%, just for the sheer fact of implementing a policy to have them not have their phones. I think it's unrealistic, to be honest, at this point. So if we can, change the culture and we can rely on our principals at the facilities to implement that, I don't see that being a negative. So I'd say I'm obviously leaning towards option B as well, to be a rational, common sense approach to trying to be clear to our students what we expect them to be doing in the classroom. And we're on that.
Okay, Tony?
Yeah, and just in hearing your guys' thoughts, I honestly feel the same in many areas, and I do feel that there's a balance here, and I think that we have to give some leeway to the principals and teachers to make the rules in the class. But I like the idea of having them off during class, because it is such a distraction. There's just so much, and I'm speaking from personal experience, right? So you got to turn that freaking thing off and focus your attention on the task at hand. So I like B the best out of all of them. If we had to pick between one of these three right now.
I'd like to hear what Pam and Jason have to say about it too.
Yeah, I agree that, I think that seems as though it's the most reasonable and enforceable.
Yeah.
One of the things just to keep in mind is that within option B then, is the ability to delineate before and after school is one piece.
Right.
We want them also at lunch break, we can check that. We
Right.
want an option in between classes or no. So there is a little bit of yes and no within that as well, or it could be the whole piece.
Yeah. So I think we would break it down next, like, just to see if there's any pieces we want to, include in it. So, Jason, do you have an opinion about it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with everything you said. I look around and I see Pam's phone is up, right? Philip's phone is up, mine is usually up, so I think it reflects the current reality.
Yeah. We have to allow them to have it sometimes. I just don't see that as an option to say it's just going to be put away. I mean, that would be great, right? But that day is gone. So,
I know we're gonna get to that when we start speaking to the brackets and parentheses,
Right.
but I do know that many of our teachers utilize phones to get better, right? Whether it's through an interactive slideshow, like we have Pear Deck, for example, or other ways to assess, really deep for them. So I think for that, that's something to consider as well.
yeah, I'm a bit concerned about that myself from having been, especially at Lincoln, that's where it's used the most, right, for teachers to use it. But like, for example, my experience alone in the art room, a lot of our students use their phones as their camera. So, I mean, we need to probably consider allowing some of that to take place. The hard thing is there's a big confusion then about, well, Ms. Willis lets me use the phone, and then they don't. But that's gonna have to be part of that implementation, and maybe some of that is just a sticker on a door, this is a no cell phone zone, or, something to that effect.
Yeah, I mean, implementation, we give the power to the trusted people to make those decisions, so they need to implement it correctly, and then the principal needs to back them up on their decisions. So,
Right.
obviously, we can move forward. I think we should move forward option B, obviously,
Okay.
guided to that.
All right, let's pick it apart then, guys. So we have, students may use their personal cell phone devices before and after school is one. Yes,
Yes.
okay. During their lunch break. I
Yes.
think- Matthew?
Yeah.
Yes. In between classes, as long as they do not create a distraction, disruption, or otherwise interfere with the educational environment.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. During after-school activities and meaning extracurricular activities.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And at school-related functions, so like a dance.
That's right.
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Yep, okay. So that covers all of them. So we're saying yes to all of the option B. The second part is, however, technology, including but not limited to personal communication devices intended and actually used for instructional purposes, such as taking notes, recording classroom lectures, writing papers, will be permitted as approved by the classroom teacher or the building principal. Do you agree to that? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And the use of their PCD to engage in non-education related communications is expressly prohibited. I say yes.
Yes.
Using it's outside of education. All
I
right.
think
So
that's helpful with some of the social media.
yeah. So we are hoping to pass along option B. We have included all the options with that then. So, right. Okay, that's a great piece. Thank you, guys. Now there is some in the body. So let's see if we go on. So here is our second, here, I should just read the whole thing if somebody's watching. Students may not use PCDs on school property or at school-sponsored activity to access and review internet websites that are otherwise blocked to students at school. If school vehicles was not selected in option 1, well, we didn't do that, so we can skip that paragraph, I believe, right?
Yeah, we just make the letter ride, usually while they're riding the school buses.
Yeah, so we skip that paragraph? Am I right with that?
Doesn't pertain to,
Okay.
we're giving them access to it.
All right, during after-school activities, PCD shall be powered completely off, not just placed into vibrate or silent mode, and stored on the site when directed by the administrator or sponsor. Under certain circumstances, a student may keep his or her PCD on with prior approval from the building principal. Except as authorized by a teacher, administrator, or IEP team, students are prohibited from using PCDs during the school day, including while off campus on a field trip, to capture, record, or transmit the words or sounds and/or images, pictures, videos of any student, staff member, or other person. Using a PCD to capture, record, and/or transmit audio, pictures, video of an individual without proper consent is considered an invasion of privacy and is not permitted. Now we have options. Students who violate this provision and/or use a PCD to violate the privacy rights of another person, and then shall or may have their PCD confiscated and held until 1, the end of the school day, a parent picks it up, or may be directed to delete the audio and/or picture video file while the parent is present. If the violation involves potentially illegal activity, the confiscated PCD may be turned over to law enforcement. So can we just deal with that paragraph first? Okay. So our options are, let's see where we go through here. Using a PCD to capture either record, or transmit the audio, pictures, video, blah, blah, blah. It goes to students who violate the provision and/or use a PCD to violate the privacy rights of another person, either shall or may have their PCD confiscated and held. And then we'll do the last part of that. Jason?
Yeah, first currency there is an option, do we want that sentence started there? So the first question, I believe, is
Oh, yeah, you're right,
students
sorry.
who violate this provision
Yeah.
and/or use, do we want that included?
Yeah, thank you. I missed that one. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Tony? I think he's reading.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to process this. It's like a bunch of attorney speak, sorry.
It is kind of, yeah. That's why attorneys put this together.
I think it means you want to point out in that start of that statement, you want to point out that they are violating someone else's rights.
Yeah.
The privacy rights of someone else.
Yeah, so that just seems like pretty broad, I guess. And again, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying, what if there was like a fight in the classroom or something? I don't know. Again, I'm just throwing this out there as an option, and someone recorded that. Like, is that a bad thing, or would that be a good thing? You know what I mean?
Same thing. It's because they're talking about audio, video, and pictures. It covers all of it.
I think the part before that, Tony, covers that and
Yeah.
says, except with permission, you're not allowed to have your device used during the school day. That's all that first part.
Yeah.
This here is saying, do you want to include that section that's going to talk about essentially the consequences if you violate that? So this whole last part here is about, do you want to specify what would happen if someone violated that?
And the specificity comes at the next
After that,
decision.
yeah.
Help us add specificity.
Yeah. It's kind of like if someone should haul out their phone,
Then,
yeah.
As part of that policy,
Right.
you want to state that.
Yeah, so we want to make sure it's clear that we don't want to invade anyone's privacy.
So, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand like how that could happen in a classroom setting.
Well,
Right?
it would happen if someone violated the rule where we said you cannot have your cell phone device on but maybe a teacher is using it for educational purposes and they choose to use it in a way that's inappropriate and violates someone's privacy. So we're basically saying, okay, if you do this, you understand you're violating someone's privacy, and this is what may or should happen to you. Like, we haven't decided that part yet. But it's basically saying, if you hauled your cell phone out when it wasn't appropriate, or recorded someone, or took photos of someone, what are the consequences of doing that when it's already, because we're making that policy surrounding it.
Okay.
Tony, I think it also takes into consideration that first part of that statement where it says students are not authorized to use their personal communication device unless they're given permission by a teacher, administrator, or it's part of an IEP team. So it's taking both, not only just the privacy right piece, but it's saying if you violate it. I have my cell phone out during math class, and I'm not supposed to have my cell phone out because the teacher didn't give me permission. So this would be also including that kind of discussion about what the consequence for that would be, if that makes sense.
I think it also highlights the opposite of that. That the math teacher said, go on your cell phone and use decimals, which is this graphic thing. And then I, instead of doing that, start taking pictures.
Right.
So it's now saying you were allowed, for whatever reason, and now you're violating the rights of others.
Yeah.
So then, again, if we check that sentence starter is, we're saying yes, and then the decisions we're making next are adding the specificity of what could have that then state.
Right.
Gotcha. All right, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything?
No,
Okay.
where we can move forward.
Okay, so I believe we are checking the box.
Yeah.
Students who violate this provision and/or PCD to violate the privacy rights of another person. Now we're at the next phase of consequences. They either shall or they may have their PCD confiscated and held. So let's just dive into that part. Will we for sure do that? Or may have it done? May leaves wiggle room. Shall means it absolutely will be confiscated.
I'll talk. So I think we should shall, because we give them so much, we're giving freedom and responsibility to our students, that at this point, now you've broken the trust, and now there has to be a consequence, even though it may be cumbersome, and it might, not be as easy for everyone. I think a shall is more important, and that would be the discretion of the teacher or the principal at this point, once it's confiscated.
Jason?
I think you just made a counter argument to
You did.
yourself.
Yeah.
Right? When you say the discretion, I think that's the may, right? So if I go back to that math example, right? Teacher says, yep, you can use your cell phone to do decimals. Your graphic, I make the decision to take a picture of Kathy, right? The may would allow the teacher, Pamela, to say, Kathy, bad call, delete that. Sorry, Jason, bad call, bad decision. Show me that you're deleting the picture, or call your parents, we're gonna move forward with life. Shall would be a different story. Just for quick.
Yeah, shall is an absolute.
So, what I'm trying to say is that the student made the choice to take a picture when they weren't supposed to. They were given the responsibility, the opportunity to use it in an educational setting. And now it's not in the teacher's hand, it's in the principal or the school board's decision that it has to be confiscated, and we have to go through the process to receive it. Otherwise, there's no teeth in the decision that the student made, correct or incorrect.
Yeah, I think what I see, may has a lot of gray area to it. And so in order to be really specific for everybody, we keep talking behavior plan about being universal. Shall is very universal. There's no give and take with that, right? So like if I'm a teacher, what if you have, Jason takes a picture of Kathy and well, this time we'll let it go. But then what if you have another student do the same thing, but it's even more inappropriate? And then it needs to be, they're treated differently and the phone is confiscated. I feel like this alleviates some of the question marks for later. So I think shall gives a lot more power to, like, what do I say, to making this policy solid. I know I'm not saying it the way I want to,
Yeah.
but it gives, like you said, teeth.
Yep, so I mean, we're empowering the student to make the right decisions. However, there has to be consequences if they don't make the right decision. And one last point I'll make about the shall, it doesn't make the teacher the bad person.
No, right?
Because what everybody wants to build relationships. And if we don't build a relationship on, well, Miss Susie, let you have the cell phone, take the picture. Why don't you let me have this happen now this time? So it takes the burden of interrogation or just bad feelings for the teacher away from the teacher, and it puts the teacher in a position that they shouldn't have had to be in already if the policy was followed.
Yeah, I agree. Tony?
Yeah, thanks, guys. After hearing you both, and it's not only hearing you both, but just I've heard from numerous people that the phones are a big distraction in the district, from what I've gathered, and I think that there has to be consequences for not adhering to whatever the classroom and the rules are. So I think that's the way to go. I like shall too.
Yeah, I mean, it still allows for teachers to make a decision whether or not the cell phones are being used in their classroom. We're just talking about inappropriate use with.
Right. Yeah, and there has to be consequences for not following the rules. So
I mean, we're all in agreement. So, and so then the next part of that is if they have violated privacy rights of another person, shall have their PCD confiscated and held until, now this is our next part, either the end of the school day, a parent picks it up, and it may be directed to delete audio and picture video file while the parent is present.
I think you want to take those first students. Will it be held until
Okay,
the end
so-
of the school day or until a parent picks it up? What's
Okay.
the preference?
This is tricky to me because I really feel as though I'm surprised they didn't include another option in this.
Is it
That,
a class period or something? Or is that what you're thinking?
well, no, actually, I'm thinking more like, given circumstances, it's very much either the student can pick it up at the end of the day or the parent picks it up. And I'm surprised that there's not a third option in there at the, like maybe numbers of violation or something, but, I don't know if I have an opinion about this one. Maybe having parents pick it up seems really drastic, but sometimes you need the parents to pick it up too, but that would be the first offense, right? Like, it's the offense.
So I just want to be under the assumption that the principal of the building is the enforcer of this is that what we're, so I mean.
Yeah, because
I want to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, later in the body, it talks about having to have it in a secure location. So in past practices, I believe that either the teacher held it to the end of the school hour, a lot of times it happened to the end of the classroom hour, or many times it was taken to the principal's office or down to the office. And I'm thinking generally in high school terms here, that's where I came across it the most. But what do you guys think?
I'm leaning towards the end of the school day. And
Yeah.
That's kind of what I want to, I mean, I want them to have their ability to communicate after school if they need to get picked up from school or they want to hang out with their friends or, just their daily lives after school. So I think, obviously the 7th hour or the 8th hour obviously doesn't pertain to as much. So that's a disadvantage, but I think that's reasonable in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't want to make it too hard. And, I mean, frankly, some people don't have parents available to come and pick up their phones.
Yep.
I mean, I've seen that or heard that happen, that it might be a day or two before a parent or guardian could get there. So I too would be the end of the school day.
I'm going to disagree with you guys there. I almost think that it would be better to have the parents come and pick it up because, that would, I think, serve as more of a deterrent to students that are probably, really want their phones from, just breaking policy. And I think it would encourage another form of accountability between the student and the parent. And I think really we're going to need to work with parents. I mean, this should be something that you would think that they would align with us on. Hey, just, follow the policy at school on the phones, right? So I think, I'm going to lean more towards having the parents, making them come and pick it up, because I think that if that happens enough times, it's probably going to piss off some of these parents, and they're going to be motivated to work and work with their kids to change that behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with understanding, it's just, unless the student is exonerated, the parent, might not be available to pick it up that day. I mean, say you have a middle schooler walking home from Wilson or Washington, and they made a mistake in school. And I do agree with you, it's just, I don't know how we're gonna implement that correctly.
I kind of see it as like, if it boils down to that, where we're having issues with the student multiple times, and they pick up their phone, that becomes, I think, like a principal parent discussion, right? Like where we need to have some more communication. Jason?
I am not a lawyer, but I think we could add comma and have best of both worlds.
You think so?
Yeah,
I like
this. Right, so I think we could check all the following boxes. So it would read, held until the end of the school day, comma, a parent picks it up, comma, and may be directed. So that gives that flexibility where it's the first offense. We walk through the restorative practices of understanding the why, what, how. The principal has walked that student through that process, makes the decision to say, this is your first time I've ever seen you. It's the 4th year at Lincoln. Never seen the office about cell phone. Take your phone, be done with it, I'm gonna talk to a parent. Versus Jason's in the office for the 17th time, it's September 5th. And then they say, and this time, your parents can.
Yeah.
So
I like
I
that.
agree with you, but I don't think a comma is the correct thing. Or, because if it would be an or, then it would be,
Could it be and or?
no, so what we're trying to get at is you would like a progression, right, Jason? Okay, so if we would like a progression, we have to state it as a progression. Otherwise, it would be an option. So like, at the end of the day, comma, parent picks, that would mean that at the end of the day, comma, meaning that then if they didn't pick it up at the end of the day, then it would be a parent to pick it up. It wouldn't be a progression. I think we should reword it a little bit if we want it to be a progression.
We could, as Pam say, at the end of the day, or a parent picks it up. I still think we're directing them to delete the audio and picture.
Oh, most definitely. So that's why I kind of don't like the progression. It should be deleted no matter what.
But maybe it's an or instead of my comment.
I think the or might give the ability for what you were talking about, where like I call and I'm trying to get a hold of a parent to say so-and-so's got to get their phone and it's not working.
Yeah.
Send it home with them, or, to be able to say, okay, this is the first situation. Now we're at a point where we've got multiple situations. Now we're going to say a parent stuff.
The true spirit of the conversation and the discussion is great, and what I'm trying to get at, and what we're trying to get at, is a feasible option that we put teeth in it, so that Tony's suggesting, a parent has to pick it up. That's going to really make the student angry, and it's going to probably make the parent more engaged. So I do understand that, and I like that, but I don't know if it's quite feasible. So I don't know how we could, unless we change the wording. We got to change the wording.
It's about leaving some options. Like so cut and dry, either the student gets it or the parent gets it. It depends on the circumstances, is what we're saying. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how to move forward with that with Neola.
Well, I would like, I would be okay with at the end of the day or the parent picks it up. Obviously that I would be okay with accepting that it's one or the other. So it could be or then. So that would be fine. I don't think Tony would do that, but then the directed audio, I would like to have that for sure. I don't know where you're at, everybody, but that's great.
I think I'm with you. I think the end of the school day or a parent picks it up also leaves options for the principal to make that decision, you know, and the teacher, depending on the offense, or the number of offenses. I do feel as though the last part of it should be included, that it should be, that they may be directed, it's may be directed to lead in the presence of their parent. I think that's important. But I like the or.
Yeah, that's a problem too, presence of the parent. I mean, you're asking them to, then you're asking the parent to come so that they can believe it. So then the parent has to be there.
Well, I think that's the key, but it's may, it's not they have to. And I think that it would become on the offense. You know, if you're taking video of someone in a locker room, for example, that better be deleted in front of a parent so that parent understands and sees what was going on. So that they see the severity of the situation. You know, but if someone's just taking a picture of their friend moving around in the classroom and it's really not that big of a deal, right? But it's still going against this policy, they wouldn't have to necessarily delete that in front of their parents. It allows for that may, meaning may or may not.
All right, getting back to home base, so if we just check all three, what does that really mean? That means they can pick it up at the end of the day, parent can pick it up, and they may be directed, isn't that what we're
I
at?
think grammatically, we just need an or.
Yeah.
I really believe that,
Okay,
if we're comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with that. Matthew,
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Tony?
Yeah, so are you guys talking about using the or? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, and I think Jason brings up a good point, because if you're a first-time offender and you're relatively clean versus someone who keeps breaking the rules, I think you probably approach that a little bit differently. So I think that seems reasonable and a good path forward.
Yep, okay, great. So we're checking them out, but with an or.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. PCDs with cameras or any other recording capabilities may not be activated or utilized at any time in any school situation where reasonable expectation of personal privacy exists. These locations and circumstances include, but are not limited to, classrooms, gymnasiums, locker rooms, shower facilities, rest and bathrooms, and any other areas where students or others may change clothes or be in any stage or degree of disrobing or changing clothes. The district administrator and building principals are authorized to determine other specific locations and situations where use of a PCD is absolutely prohibited.
So this looks like the question is, do you want to include classrooms and gymnasiums in with the list of other places where it would not be allowed for students to take pictures of others without their permission?
Yeah, this is about basically disrobing. Yeah, absolutely. That's,
Yeah, those
I
are
don't even know
given.
how to think about it.
But no, what Pam's trying to say is that, so say there's a presentation in the classroom, and Johnny pulls out his phone and starts recording, you know, the teacher said it was okay to record, but it's a presentation that Pam is doing, and Pam doesn't really like that Johnny's recording. That this is where that comes into the classroom. And then a gymnasium, if there's a performance or something, say there's a basketball game or something, or gymnastics, it's referring to that. That's what it's referring to, because then the privacy of the people that are in those facilities aren't being jeopardized. That's what I'm summarizing.
I'm thinking about in the classroom, for example, I think your example is spot on, right? We're doing a presentation about graphing exponential functions, right? And the teacher says, yeah, if you need one to record this, it's going to be on your final exam, you can do that, everyone comfortable? Yes. Versus, we have community circles in some of our classrooms or advisory, and people are sharing maybe some delicate situations of their home life over the weekend. There would be an expectation for privacy. And that's where we would say, look, we're not recording there, and we're in the classroom.
But this is, I thought this paragraph is dealing with pretty specifically disrobing and changing clothes.
I don't think that's an option.
It is,
From
it's
Neola.
just talking, but the things that we could check are classrooms. Do we want to exclude classrooms? Remember the only two options, but everything else is good. It just, we're trying to, just gave two examples of when it could be a problem. So,
Because it's about personal privacy.
Yep.
So, yeah.
But again, the examples I'm thinking about are specific to classrooms. There may be classroom presentations about really exciting exponential functions where we say, yes, we're going to record this, we're going to upload that to Google Classroom, versus we're having a really open, honest, vulnerable conversation about our home life in a community circle. There would be an expectation that we're not recording.
so by checking classrooms, we're prohibiting the use of the recording device in the classroom unless it's educational.
Where there's expectation for privacy.
So I think we should
Check it.
check it so that
Yeah.
we don't have that discrepancy about personal time in a personal discussion in a classroom. You agree? Okay, and then with the gymnasium one, would be like I was trying to refer it, if there was a gymnastics meet or a swimming meet, and a student was recording another student in the situation, that would be the example, kind of.
I think that might be a non-example, because I don't think you walk into a gymnastics competition with an expectation for privacy. Right, so,
Public.
right, so I'm trying to think of an
It
example.
could be, you
But
know,
it's hard because you have locker rooms, shower facilities.
it could be a student gets hurt and starts crying.
There
We
you go.
would
Yep, there
not
you go.
want
Injury.
another student taking a picture, or an injury,
That's
taking a
true.
picture of somebody. Sometimes we have medical emergencies, right?
Right.
And, you know, so I think this would say, there's a reasonable expectation for privacy in those kinds
Yeah.
of
I
situations.
agree.
We would not want that to be.
So I think we should check that one.
I would check it too. Tony? Tony?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to process this.
I'm not sure if you had your mic on, so.
Yeah, I agree with what Pam just said. You know, I think there are I'm just trying to think. You know, would this prevent people? Let's just say like you were watching your friend at a basketball game, right? And you wanted to record them, you know, shooting a shot or something. Are you saying they couldn't do that, or was that?
I think that's covered by the intro there, where it says, where a reasonable expectation of personal privacy exists, right? So if Lincoln's playing a basketball game, I don't think players, coaches, or attendees have any expectation of privacy. That's
Right.
different than, and Pam gives a great example of a gym class. Someone falls down, hurts their ankle, someone's
Right.
recording them. That's-
Okay, all right, I got it. I'm good with that then. Thank you.
We're checking both.
We're
Yeah.
checking both.
Yep.
All right, moving on then. Students shall have no expectation of confidentiality with respect to their use of PCDs on school premises or property. Students may not use a PCD in any way that might reasonably create in the mind of another person an impression of being threatened, humiliated, harassed, embarrassed, or intimidated. See policy 5517.01 on bullying, which we are addressing later. In particular, students are prohibited from using PCDs to transmit material that is threatening, obscene, disruptive, or sexually explicit, or that can be construed as harassment or disparagement of others based upon their race, color, national origin, sex, including sexual orientation, transgender identity, disability, age, religion, ancestry, or political beliefs, and 2, engaging in sexting, i.e. sending, receiving, sharing, viewing, or possessing pictures, text messages, emails, or other materials of sexual nature in electronic or any other form. Violation of these prohibitions shall result in disciplinary action. Furthermore, such actions will be reported to local law enforcement and child services as required by law. Students are also prohibited from using PCD to capture, record, and transmit test information or any other information in a manner constituting fraud, theft, cheating, or academic dishonesty. Likewise, students are prohibited from using PCDs to receive such information. Possession of a PCD by a student at school during school hours, here's our options, and or during extracurricular activities is a privilege that may be forfeited by any student who fails to abide by the terms of this policy or otherwise abuses this privilege.
I think that gives that next layer of enforcement. So if it's continuing to be an issue, this statement here is saying at a minimum, they're going to lose the privilege to have it with them during school hours. The decision here is, do you want to include and or during extracurricular activity?
Guys, any ideas?
Would extracurricular be like after school stuff, right? Like sports and
Could be football, yeah, or something.
Well, sports.
yeah.
We don't have no business, so we're not gonna be able to enforce it.
I guess for me personally, I think just the first sentence is fine. I'm not sure if we need that second one.
What it's saying here is we would then look at possession of a PCD by a student at school during school hours is a privilege that may be forfeited by any student who fails to abide by the terms of this policy. You just strike out that and extracurriculars part.
No, I'm good with that.
Not checking.
We're not checking it. The first one we didn't check. Okay, are we good with that, guys?
Yes.
Okay. So we are crossing that part out. Sorry, I'm going to do this quick. Okay, the last, oh, it's not the last paragraph. Violations of this policy may result in disciplinary action and or confiscation of the PCD. The building principal will also refer the matter to law enforcement or child services if the violation involves an illegal activity. Discipline will be imposed on an escalating scale ranging from a warning to an expulsion based on the number of previous violations and or the nature of or circumstances surrounding a particular violation. If the PCD is confiscated, it will be released, returned to the student's parent after the student complies with any other disciplinary consequences that are imposed, unless the violation involves potential illegal activity, in which case the PCD may be turned over to law enforcement. A confiscated device will be marked in a removable manner with the student's name and held in a secure location in the building's central office until it is retrieved by the parent or turned over to law enforcement. School officials will not search or otherwise tamper with PCDs in district custody unless they are reasonably suspect that the search is required to discover evidence of a violation of the law or other school rules. Any search will be conducted in accordance with policy 5771, search and seizure. If multiple offenses occur, a student may lose his or her privilege to bring a PCD to school for a designated length of time or on a permanent basis. A person who discovers a student using a PCD in violation of this policy is required to report the violation to the building principal. Students are personally and solely responsible for the care and security of their PCDs. The board assumes no responsibility for theft, loss, or damage to, or misuse, or unauthorized use of PCDs brought onto its property. Here are the two options. Parents are advised that the best way to get in touch with their child during the school day is by calling the school office, or students may use cell phones to contact parents during the school day. I would be in favor of both of those.
Yeah.
Parents should be calling school offices, not texting their kids to see if they need to be picked up, especially if we're creating a policy where they're not allowed to be had up even on during the day. I think that's part of the issue that we've had in the past is, saying what if, that's what the school office is there for. And certainly if a student needs to call home and talk to a parent during the day, they may do that. Or of course, during the time when they, lunch or between classes when they have the ability to use that cell phone, but not during their instructional time.
I would agree, and it doesn't pertain to us because we're giving the responsibility to the student to use their time wisely. They have plenty of opportunities to use their phone, obviously.
I'm good with that.
Okay, let's check those boxes. We're done with number 1. Good job. That was probably our hardest one, I hope. Maybe not. All right, one of them.
Let's just move forward.
We're done one. We're going. All right, next one is technology resources and other electronic equipment. This was 5136.01. While in some instances, the possession and use of technology resources as defined in bylaw 0100 and other electronic equipment or devices by a student at school may be appropriate, possession and use of such technology resources and other equipment or devices by students at school may also have the effect of distracting, disrupting, and or intimidating others in the school environment and leading to opportunities for academic dishonesty and other disruptions of the educational process. So here we have option one. Oh gosh, we have five options. All right, so we're going to need to distinguish these. So option one is consequently, the Board of Education will supply any technological resources and other electronic equipment or devices necessary for participation in the educational program. Students shall not use or possess any technology resources and other technology equipment or devices on school property or at any school-sponsored activity without the permission of either the principal, the classroom teacher, or a fill in the blank. So that would be option one. So we're gonna put this down in a nutshell. They just don't get to use anything besides what we supply them. Is that what you guys see?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's not feasible. Okay, Tony, you're good with that? Not feasible? We're kind of contradicting our cell phone policy if we go with option one. Okay, so I'm gonna cross that one out on my stuff anyway. Okay. Option two is, let's see here. Option two, drafting note. Option 2A restricts use for educational and instructional purposes, while option 2B permits use during instructional time for educational or instructional purposes only, but permits use during non-instructional time for any use that is consistent with the district's acceptable use policy. Okay, so option 2A, students may use the following technology resources and other electronic equipment or devices on school property only for educational or instructional purposes. Option B is students may use the following technology resources and other electronic equipment during instructional time for educational or instructional purposes with the teacher's permission and supervision, and may use these technology resources and other electronic equipment during non-instructional time, provided such use is consistent with the policy 7540, student acceptable use and safety.
So an example of that would be, I believe, like we provide them with a Chromebook. So it's my lunchtime, and I'm going to use the Chromebook to, you know, check Amazon. look at, listen to music, something along those lines.
Okay,
I don't think 2A is an option,
okay,
because it's saying in the highlights, or the bold, restricts use for educational and instructional purposes. We just went through it when we said that could be a time where phone would be used.
Yeah.
To
and
be
it's not
like
just
that.
phones, but phones is included in that, yeah. Okay, so is that how you guys see it? Matthew?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're eliminating option 2A. Tony, are you nodding?
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure I had your opinion on it, so. Okay, so if we went with, should we skip option 2B then and go to 3 and then narrow it down if we need to? That would make more sense to me. Okay, option 3 is students may use the following technology resources and other electronic equipment or devices while riding to and from school on a school bus or other vehicle provided by the board. Then it gives all the options. Let's see, is there anything else included on that? Yes. Okay. And then just the end of option 3 was distracting behavior that creates an unsafe environment will not be tolerated. So basically, we're talking about the to and from school stuff now, right?
What's differentiating? I mean, obviously, why wouldn't, you guys understand my concerns here. So personal communication device, obviously now phones are personal communication devices and, smartphones. So we're kind of modeling in the same
Yeah,
laptop.
I'm assuming they're just trying to be really specific in case,
I know.
you know, there's any question, but it is kind of redundant.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's 3. It really becomes about busing more than anything, right? Do you see it any other way, guys?
In option 3,
Yeah,
really focus
on busing.
on other locations.
Okay, so let's skip to 4. Not skip to it, but go to number 4. Our 4th option is, however, the use of any communication functionality that is a part of or attached to the above approved technology resources and other electronic equipment or devices is expressly prohibited. This includes but is not limited to wireless internet access, peer-to-peer ad hoc networking, or any other method of communication with other devices or networks. In no circumstances shall the device be allowed to connect to the district's computer network. Huh.
No,
It doesn't seem like
there's
it
a shared
either.
drive, isn't there? So if somebody brings a laptop in and they want to go to their Google, that's
Right.
a part with the Google, what's it called, their student portfolio. I mean, it's all through a shared drive, so that's not feasible either.
We
Right, I
have
get that.
some students that bring their own device and don't use that phone.
Yeah,
Correct.
right. Tony, are you okay with eliminating option 4?
Sure.
Okay. Option 5, the preceding prohibitions do not apply to board-owned and issued laptops, tablets, e-readers, PDAs, or other assistive technology devices. I think that's,
I think you want that in there, probably.
well, yeah, because if it's board-owned and issued laptops. So this is anything that is issued by the district.
Yeah.
So we do need to keep this in, don't you think?
Yeah.
Are you guys swinging it any other way?
I think we have to go back
It
to
is a
the
bit
opening
confusing.
paragraph.
Yeah.
What's making this different than personal communication
Talks
device?
about possession and use of such technology, resource, and other equipment. They also affect the distracting, so we're really talking about disruption, right? And dishonesty. Then we're saying in 2B, for example, I think we're really centering on a couple options here. They can still, students may still use other technology resources during the instructional time for their instructional purposes with teacher permission. And then we would have the option to say, well, yes. I think that, in my opinion, 2B might be aligned with what we just talked about. Because
think
we're
so.
saying, right, they could use a camera with teacher permission. They could
Mhm.
use their laptop, so on and so forth.
Would anybody be opposed to not adopting this policy because of the redundancy of the personal communication device policy?
But it addresses
Or does it?
the tablets and like other, like I'm just thinking even, like, what about Apple Watches, those kinds of things? Anything disruptive.
The personal communication device. A
Yeah,
watch,
that's right.
I mean, it's all, I mean,
I just don't think it harms us. I think it don't you think it clarifies more?
I don't see the need of it unless somebody can please explain to me.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It feels pretty redundant.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
so should we we could always just table this, and if we see a need for it in the future, we can do that. Does that make sense?
I would be inclined to do that.
Okay, so let's for now pass on 5136. So 120, if you are okay with that, we can kind of like table it, knowing that at some point in time we may come back to it, but Matthew's seeing redundancy, we kind of all do. But we'll keep this on the back burner in case we want to address it again.
Sounds great.
Okay, all right. Let's
What's
All
the
right.
next one?
Next one is student and parent rights. I don't know if I'm going on order of our, I don't think it matters, so was it? Okay, so the first one is,
Tony, this is where we're back to the number system is the same as the current policy. So
yes, this is
number 5780 is our current policy. We're reviewing 5780.
Got it.
Now, actually, when I look at this, guys, I don't see any changes because according to what we currently have and the policy from Neola, oh no, it was modified on 2017.
Yeah, the only change I believe to this is that option that exists in the template was not selected. So if you look at this, there's after that paragraph that starts with attendance,
Oh, yeah.
rights.
Like the third paragraph.
Yeah, in that, I think it's the third paragraph down. The fourth one is
The
in
board.
the template, the
Oh.
board realizes that as students differ in age and maturity, so they differ in the ability to handle both the rights of citizens and the concomitant responsibilities. The exercise of each right shall be granted, therefore, with due regard for the degree of responsibility possessed by the student and the student's need for continuing guidance and control of those responsible for his or her education.
Yeah.
That statement, it looks like either was a new statement that Neola was giving an option to add, or it wasn't selected by the board previously in the last go around for this policy.
I would be in favor of selecting that because that is a reality that our kids are in different places. And I think this also brings into account for, our special education students. Or
There's a stipulation.
is there a stipulation?
So that-
Okay, so that's not included. But I still believe that, age and maturity can be taken into consideration. I mean, maybe you guys see it a different way, so do you have any thoughts on that?
There was something I was concerned about. I haven't got to it yet. Let me just make sure.
Okay.
At first glance, I don't see a problem with that statement.
Of adding it in?
Yeah, I do not see a problem at first glance.
I think it really speaks to the fact that we may have, I think of code of conduct that the ad hoc committee will be looking at.
Mhm.
The code of conduct will probably be differentiated by grade level.
Yeah.
And something that we tell, teach, think about, help our kindergarten students is a little different than our seniors, for example. That's what I think is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, it's just an acknowledgement that everyone is not in that same place. Tony, what do you feel?
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at the downside, and I'm not sure if I could see an obvious one, and it sounds like no one else can either.
Yeah.
So I'll defer to you guys on this one then.
Okay, well, I'm good with Xing it then, if you guys are.
I'm okay with that.
All right, Matthew is yes.
Yes.
Tony?
Okay. Yes.
All right, yes, okay, thank you. We're done with that policy then.
Well, I do have a.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
so there's something I do. So,
No, that's just
a student who is still a dependent for federal tax purposes, but who has reached the age of maturity may, by written request, restrict his or her parents' access to personal identifiable information for his or her student records. Can somebody give me an example?
18-year-old student
Yep.
Sometimes 19-year-old student
Yep.
who's still claimed on their federal taxes by their parent
Yeah.
says, I do not want my parent to have access anymore to my report card. In some cases, it might be to my individual education plan as a special education student, that they prefer that they are now, as by reaching that 18-year-old and adulthood, that they are able to speak for themselves. And they no longer want their parents to be listed as their kind of primary guardian. They want to be their own guardian.
The only thing that I would request is we change the age of 18.
I think it says that,
It says maturity.
age of maturity, or majority, and what that is age 18, so in the
Is there
state, in the state
That means 18?
guidelines, yeah, and
As
so
right now.
the reason why it's not optional to change that is because in the state statute, it does use the age of majority.
Okay.
And it happens very seldom, and it says here, written request process.
As long as it's at 18,
Yeah.
for what the federal government considers it to be at this point in time. Okay, that was my, yeah, is there any, yeah, I mean, I didn't,
There are no other options given us. I mean, the rest of things just abides by laws with student parent rights.
okay, we can move forward.
All right, thanks, guys. Okay, so,
Hey, guys, I had one quick thing on this while we're on this policy.
yeah,
You know, I'm looking at the paragraph that starts with, in addition, parents have the right to inspect any instructional materials. And specifically, I'm looking at that last sentence that says instructional material does not include academic tests or academic assessments. And I was just trying to think of a good reason why parents wouldn't have access to that, unless I'm not seeing it. But
I'm thinking ahead of time, I'm thinking what that is, and I could be wrong about this, but I questioned that also, like, that seemed odd to me, but I think it's about, like, parents having access to tests and assessments ahead of time, because, then there could be issues with the validity of the test, yeah.
I
So,
also think of state testing that
right, yeah, they don't have access to state testing or anything like that, so that's why that's included.
so can we clarify that maybe? You know, I just want to make sure it's like if the kids take a test at school, you know, I would imagine the graded test goes home, right? Parents can see that. I understand what you're saying. Obviously, you know, we don't want to give the parents copies of the test before the test necessarily, but I just want to make sure if they want to see the test afterward, they can, and that this isn't prohibiting that.
Yeah, I think this is the right to inspect, so that would be beforehand, Tony, not in terms of feedback to a student. This is like the beforehand part, when they're
Yeah.
referring to the right to inspect.
Okay, all right, I see that. Okay,
Okay,
all right, thank you.
great, thanks, guys. All right, let's move on then to, I believe it's 5,000 to disorderly conduct, our shortest one.
55.
What's that?
55.
5520, right, thank you. The board recognizes the right of each student to attend school for the purposes of receiving an education. Students involved in the disruption of the educational program of the schools by disorder or any other purposeful activities may be subject to disciplinary consequences, including but not limited to suspension and expulsion. Here's a choice. For purposes of this policy, disorder shall be any deliberate activity by an individual or a group, whether peaceful or violent, which is reasonably likely to disrupt the normal operation of the school. I'm going to stop there.
That statement exists in our current policy, so it's just a decision whether we want to keep that in our new policy.
Okay. Do we want to keep it? I don't see why we wouldn't. It's about disruption of education.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why, unless someone can come up with a good one, but we wouldn't want to disrupt that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Matthew also said yes, so let's check that box. The board, having the responsibility for providing an educational program for the students of this district, shall have the authority to preserve order for the proper functioning of its program. Students shall not be disturbed in the exercise of their constitutionally guaranteed rights to assemble peaceably and to express ideas and opinions privately or publicly, provided that such exercise does not infringe on the rights of others and does not interfere with the operation of the schools. The box we can or cannot check is the district administrator shall develop administrative guidelines for the implementation of this policy. Now, we have noticed on the ad hoc committee that we do not have administrative guidelines for our policies, but that is not always commonplace. A lot of districts have them, but we had chosen apparently not to have them in the past. Even though it's included in our current policy that the superintendent shall have those guidelines, those have never, as far as I know, have been developed. So do we need to put this on there? Do you want to? I think currently it's hard because we have an interim, and this can always be modified later. How does everyone see it?
Can you define the difference between district administrator and superintendent?
Well, that is the same thing.
That's what-
It's just that we have the interim, right now we have the interim, so that's where it needs to be. The adjustment would be made. I mean, we could put district administrator, assuming that whoever becomes one down the road, but right now we have an interim. Or do we leave it off?
I would mistake the same, I mean, oh, you're saying we'd have to eliminate it and have to adopt this?
Yeah.
I would leave it on.
Leave it on,
Yeah,
so then we
let
will not be.
The new superintendent develop an administrative guideline, and then ask him to do it.
Okay, so let's add, I should say, okay, Tony.
Yeah, I think we should leave it on. I mean, you know, if I'm understanding it right, is the question now, because we have an interim superintendent, if this would apply, or is that? Yeah.
I would think that, me personally, that because he's an interim, he wouldn't be required to do it, but when we do have a district administrator who is permanent or full-time or.
Well, he's acting. Yeah, I mean, he's acting in that role, right? So that's the way I.
Can, but he's not, he doesn't have to, I guess is how I would see that.
Right, that's fair.
Okay, and either way, let's adopt this policy. We did add something to it, and it does update it then instead of being 2009. It was last month, yeah. Last adopted in 2016, so. Okay, so we're good moving on?
That sounds good.
That was a quick one. All right, and let's see here, where are we next? We are at bullying. This is a very long one. Did you guys have a chance to actually read this? The bullying policy?
I've read it multiple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, since you both read it, I would prefer not to have to go through this and read it out loud. No one wants to listen to me talk that long. Unless it has to be read, but I believe this has to be, I don't know if we have to read this through and through in the full board meeting, but there may be some, are there some options in here? I don't think
There is,
Page two.
on page two,
Page
under the
two,
complaints
okay.
procedure,
Okay.
that second paragraph there, the second paragraph is what's different. It does not exist in our current policy, so I don't know if it wasn't an option and now it is, or if it just wasn't selected last time. But that starts with complaints, and then you'll see that there are some choices in terms of how to address that. So I don't know, Kathy.
Oh, I not seen this one, yeah,
So
sorry.
about 2/3 of the way down on page 2,
Yeah,
the paragraph starts with complaints against.
Under complaint procedures? On the template.
The template.
oh, here's the new one, okay. I think I ended up with two current policies, that's why I kept going between the two of them. I'm not
Well,
seeing them.
okay.
Oh, yeah, there it is, I spotted it, thank you.
So it's kind of said, let's see that one of two things happened. Either one, when this was adopted in 2015 or 2011, this was either not an option or was not selected. So those are
Okay,
two things.
So if you've read all of this, we'll just go to the complaint procedures part and read that and then make those choices, right, in that paragraph. I think that's all there is, you said, right? Okay. All right, so complaint procedures. Any student who believes they have been or is the victim of bullying should immediately report the situation to the building principal or assistant principal or the district administrator. The student may also report concerns to a teacher or counselor who will be responsible for notifying the appropriate administrator or board official. Complaints against the building principal should be filed with the district administrator. Complaints against the district administrator should be filed with the board president. Complaints against a board member shall be filed with either the board president unless the complaint is against the president, in which case the complaint shall be filed with the board vice president or another board member or the district administrator, or either another board member or the district administrator, depending on the complainant's preference. All right, so it's basically like who, when the complaint is made, who it goes to and how it's forwarded. So I'll read that again. Complaints against a board member shall be filed with either the board president, unless it's about the board president. Do we agree that if it's, say, one of us as board members, it would go to the board president?
Yeah, where else would it go?
Yeah.
Right, okay. And then the next part was, if it's about the board president, in which the case the complaint shall be filed with either the board vice president, another board member, the district administrator, or another board member or district administrator. I would be more comfortable going with the last choice of the district administrator, or either another board member or the district administrator, depending on the complainant's preference. I think that, with whoever would be putting that complainant giving them some choices about where it goes, whether it be the board or our superintendent.
I think I'm reading that just a little bit differently.
Are you?
Kathy.
Okay.
So I'm reading it as we get the first choice is if there's a complaint against the board member, it should go to the board president, and if it's against the board president, it would go to the vice president. That's like selection 1. Selection 2 is if there's a complaint against the board member, it shall be filed with another board member, so any board member. If the complaint is against a board member, it should be filed with the district administrator.
Right.
And then, or either a board member or the district administrator. So
that's why
it's either the president, I don't think it's first the president and then the vice president or one of those. That's like option 1 is it goes to the president or the vice president. That's option 1.
We're selecting one, it's not a sentence starter.
Yeah.
Because the parentheses go before the choice,
Right.
and so each of those 4 are a separate choice.
So we just said that we would select the board president unless the complaint is against the president, in which the case the plaintiff shall file with the board, then we're done. It's not more. But you're suggesting, Kathy, I believe you're saying, let's not select that one, and instead select either another board member or with the district administrator.
Yeah.
I think we're just selecting one of all those options.
one out of all of those.
Yeah, so I would go with the first.
You would have it just go to our board president.
No, it goes to the board president, and if it's about the president, then it goes to the vice president.
And then it's the last part, says they would be authorized to contact the district legal counsel handling it.
So we don't want to include our district administrator, our superintendent.
Those are the options.
It's a complaint against a board member. I feel like our district administrator needs to be included in this.
Okay. So then it would be, then you're saying that all complaints about a board member will go to the district administrator?
Or another board member.
Well, those are different. So it would be another board member, or it would just be the superintendent, or it would be either a board member or the superintendent.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you're saying the last option?
The last option, right. I think some of that too depends on the circumstances.
I guess I wouldn't be opposed to that. I mean, it's gonna 9 times out of 10, it's probably gonna go to the superintendent.
Right, but I think that if it's against a board member, that's probably, I think, the most logical place for it to go.
Yeah, I guess the only,
It creates an issue too, like say if I received a complaint or if you received a complaint about me, then it makes it awkward between board members too. I'd rather see it go to this, I mean, it could even just be solidly the district administrator, but I like the idea that it could be either and open up those options. But I really feel as though our superintendent needs to be included on that no matter what. So whether it's solely him or including other board members, depending on the situation. I mean, let's hope it never happens, but it's just in case.
I don't think that's fine. I don't,
To either.
yeah, I'm fine with it.
Tony, were you going to say something?
yeah, I was just gonna say, would it be unusual? And maybe Jason, this might be a Jason or Pam question here, but would it be unusual for the superintendent to be fielding complaints about board members, or is that kind of par for the course in school board?
I think the either is probably pretty typical.
Okay. Yeah, if that's the case, then I'd probably lean towards that last one where you had the either or, wherever the person felt more comfortable, I guess, right? I think we want to let everyone feel like they have a chance to address grievances. So
And remember, this is about bullying. So, I mean, it's not anything either. This is specifically about bullying and what those definitions are of bullying.
Either?
Okay. All right, we are done with that one then. That's all we have for that one, correct? Yep. Okay, thank you. I think we're doing okay. And then, of course, we have our last one, which is our controversial issues in the classroom. So we have our current, and then we have the new Neola policy, which is written slightly different. Oh, sorry. What the heck? I haven't used my voice as much for years. All right, controversial issues in the classroom, which is number 2240, policy number 2240. The board believes that the consideration of controversial issues has a legitimate place in the instructional program of the district. Properly introduced and conducted, the consideration of such issues can help students learn to identify important issues, excuse me, explore fully and fairly all sides of an issue, weigh carefully the values and factors involved, and develop techniques for formulating and evaluating positions. In addition, the opportunity can lead students to learn about how to use critical thinking and problem-solving skills to study and analyze relevant issues, evaluate different sources of information, make intelligent decisions regarding issues, and how to appreciate the value of differing viewpoints. For purposes of this policy, a controversial issue is a topic on which opposing points of view have been promulgated by responsible opinion and are likely to arouse both support and opposition in the community. These issues may range across a wide spectrum of political, social, economic, and religious topics. The board will permit the introduction and proper educational use of controversial issues provided that their use in the instructional program, A, is related to the instructional goals of the course of study and level of maturity of the students, B, does not tend to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view, C, encourages open-mindedness and is conducted in a spirit of scholarly inquiry, D, does not cause a substantial disruption in the school environment. Controversial issues related to the program may be initiated by the students themselves, provided they are presented in the ordinary course of classroom instruction, relate to the topic of instruction, and do not cause substantial disruption to the school environment. Controversial issues may not be initiated by a source outside the schools unless prior approval has been given by the principal. Issues pertaining to human growth and development as defined by statute are subject to 118.019 Wisconsin statutes. When controversial issues have not been specified in the course of study, the board will permit the instructional use of only those issues which, here are our first choices, have been approved by the district administrator, who shall report periodically such approval to the board for their review, or have been approved by the principal or department head. Let's stop there at the moment. So where do they need to be approved and who by?
Our current policy, just for reference, says have been approved by the district administrator who shall report periodically to the board.
Yes, I would
So it's
agree
the
with that.
first grouping.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think the buck's gotta stop at the principal, so that the principal can be held accountable. So I would give the power to the principal, and then if there's a problem, that's who's gonna have to answer for it. That's my initial opinion.
But remember that they are not reporting back to the board either, though. It's strictly having them approved by the principal or department head.
Yep, but
So the oversight's not really there.
you're correct, so I do agree with that part of it. However, though, I could be wrong, I'm just saying, if the principal doesn't follow this policy, then they can be disciplined. And ultimately be terminated if they have regard to this policy.
It's insubordination.
They're not following the policy, and then they up to termination if the board decides that. And so, like, that's where, like, I want to give the free rein to the principal to make decisions, you know, so that's where, Tony, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I guess my opinion is, you know, I don't see anywhere on here, unless I'm missing it, that the board has any say on controversial issues. It seems like we're just giving all the keys to the superintendent on there. And am I reading that right?
Unless you pick, our current policy, which, says that it should be periodically approved to the board, by the board for review. That's what our current policy is.
It's not approved, though. It's not support.
No, I'm saying our current policy on the books right now, says that the district administrator has the authority to approve with periodical approval by the Board of Education.
And that would be any additional topics that are not, so here it says when they've been specified in a course of study. So, for example, a course proposal comes to the board. And in that course proposal, they talk about what are some of the controversial topics that are going to potentially be covered in that course. If the board approves it, that's a course of study that's been approved. What this would be saying is there's a new topic that's coming forward. Superintendent's giving approval for it to be brought and discussed, and would be reporting then to the board saying, in this course, they're going to add this topic. I don't even know what it is, but they would be adding, and they've gotten approval for it. Most of these types of situations are going to come through the course proposal process, because that's where the nature of the course, the content of the course, and the standards of the course are going to be outlined for the board. If that makes sense.
Obviously, there are holes in that system now. So I do agree, we need to have more transparency, so how do we fix it?
Yeah. And we're just maybe seeing it different ways. I like the piece, though, of like being reported to the board and for their review, because to me, that's part of the transparency that our superintendent would have to report that back. It would be part of our meetings, or, a form of a report.
But Pam just explained that it would only happen if it was something that wasn't outlined in a course syllabus already. So and syllabus obviously aren't small. So if there's a course syllabus that has 6 pages and one of them is X and B and C and D, and then all of a sudden, it's in the course syllabus, then it wouldn't need to be reported to the board because it's already approved by the board. you know, for that subject.
And a course adoption, not a syllabus, but like a course, course proposal, when we get the course proposal, we've had a few of those. Yeah, so that's where this information originally would be approved by the board.
It would be, in that scenario, it'd be similar to what we talked about, the book adoption, right? So Lincoln wants to create or adopt accounting 57 instead of accounting 1, right? We would bring to the board the standards, the scope and sequence, the resource that would be used, and that is at the point where it says course of study, right? This is saying where they're not that part of that.
Yeah, so that's where I have a problem with the language. It's not defining the difference. This is all, only this is saying is the addition to, course.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's where we have a hole right now.
It's almost like this is like 0.01 for what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying this is like a general, for if there's additional content that's being presented, specialty, and then this is our example. But, obviously, it has some issues, in my opinion. So, getting back to it, that's one thing. But Tony, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, I think anything that's deemed controversial, I like for it to come back to the board before, we just turn it all over. I mean, they have to ask us if they're going to hire a new teacher, right? So like, why wouldn't they ask us for something controversial? Is the way I look at it.
Kind of micromanaging though, when we've got, 400 teachers who are teaching every day, and some of these classes have controversial issues within their agendas. So how do we start?
Well, if it's a new one, then I think it should be brought before the board, right? I mean, you're asking my opinion and I'm giving it to you.
Yeah, no, I'm just talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to micromanage, but I guess it really just, otherwise I think that if we don't do that, what's the potential downside, right? I think we've seen some of that here in recent years.
So as this is written, I can stand behind it in whatever we pick, but I think we need to add to this. We need to add to this to try to fix some of the issues that have been addressed, obviously. Does that make coherent sense? That's where I'm kind of coming from. Obviously, I think Tony is too. But this is fine, it's just, we're not addressing the stuff that, so he kind of said it clearly, if it's a controversial issue, I understand the cumbersomeness of it, but
It is.
I do.
I think one of the things that's important to remember though is that the A, B, C, and D of this, that it can't cause the substantial disruption of the environment, that it encourages open-mindedness, but in a scholarly inquiry, and does not indoctrinate or persuade students. I think those are some of the things that some board members have had issues with. And it's actually related to the course of study and the level of maturity of the students.
Which, I'm on board 100%, it's not pertaining to things that could go through in normal course, or if a teacher decides to make it a part of their normal course, because there's a lot of latitude, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's what parents are being frustrated, because Johnny is being taught about something that is not in the course, approved, that was approved by the board. And then Johnny tells mom and dad say, hey, where was this approved?
Right.
So that's where, and there's so many interpretations, I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, we could easily infringe on one person's religious beliefs
And,
with others,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's where controversial content is gonna be everywhere to a point. However, I wanna make sure we're protecting, everybody, not just a so-called group. So I think this policy is fine, I just think we need to add to it, and I don't wanna send it to full board until we can shore up some of those holes, that our district is going through right now.
Okay.
So I don't know what the process would that be,
I don't
but
either.
that's where my opinion is at this time.
Okay,
Um,
so we're not ready to move forward with this yet until we determine more what's involved, like, that we're gonna see.
We can check the box that Neil asked us to, we can do that, and that's something fine, but I will not approve this to full board unless we can finish what I think we have a gap in.
Okay, so should we just try to do the checks that we
Sure, we
can
can
right
do the
now,
checks,
and
but I-
then again, kind of like moving forward, somehow start, I'm not sure how we're gonna do that, so,
We can easily, I mean, Jason, I'd ask your opinion, we can add content, and then we can amend it or edit it, and then we can send it to our attorney or
Neola,
Neola.
I mean, we pay Neola.
What we've done in the past, I don't remember the policy number, but, Joanne brought a policy forward regarding,
They would never say.
right, incisions or intrusions or whatever.
Sure.
And so there was, I think we got to a similar point. We wrote down some ideas from the team, brought that to either our Neola rep or our attorney rep, and then brought it back to further discussion. So it takes longer, but it's a process, and we get feedback.
Well, and in the meantime, we have the policy,
Yep, I
which is
agree.
not that different from this one. So in the meantime,
Yeah, I mean, we have the policy already, we wouldn't be changing anything except,
could I ask that, is there anyone who wants to volunteer on trying to add to this?
Well, I heard a suggestion from you about a couple of minutes ago there, that we would get through the options and then discuss any conditions.
So just back up for a minute. Okay, good idea. Are you good with that too,
Yeah.
Tony? Matthew? Yeah? Okay, let's get, Tony, you're okay with that? Let's do the X boxes or choices here, and then we're not going to submit it, we've made that very clear, to the full board until we've had some of these things ironed out. But let's get this part taken care of that we have in front of us, and then we'll work on adopting something else in our next discussion.
Yeah, this is kind of a big one to
Yeah.
push through without really taking our time on it. So I'd be okay if we took longer than
Okay.
to get it right.
You're okay with it, so, okay, well, let's do that then, guys. All right, so we're back to the,
yeah,
back
back
to the original.
to the superintendent.
I mean, is there another option too, since we're talking about modifying this, is there something else that someone is more comfortable with? Like, do we want principal department head, that option? Although it wasn't that, it could be both or one, so has been approved by the district administrator or superintendent. We're looking at having been approved by the principal, that's what the thinking is here with Matthew. I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, pretty much, I just want to bring accountability to the decision that whoever makes, that's being presented to our children that are very moldable, future leaders of our community. So they have to be ready for the consequences, good or bad, which I hope they're good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can stick with the same policy, I can stick with what we have as a policy right now, make no amendments, just have our superintendent and our periodically approved by the board. I mean, we can stick with that, we don't even have to change it. I just want to edit the policy and add to it.
Okay. I don't know that I have a strong opinion about this either way, so I'm gonna rely on you and Tony. I mean, unless Pam and Jason, do you have opinions on this?
It sounds like one recommendation would be to maintain what we have.
Right?
That sounds like a great idea to me. And then once we get through the check boxes, I think Matthew has some amendments.
Okay, is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would kind of almost, I would say we table it, because the policy we have right now would be the same unless we would like to change it to principal or department head. And I would be okay if we keep it, the superintendent, and then periodically approved by the board.
There are
Is there
a
more?
couple
Yeah, there's
more,
more.
Sorry,
yeah,
I don't-
That's the-
So,
That, I'm sorry.
okay, so
At the
let's,
bottom here,
I'm gonna put a big question mark by that one, and let's
page one.
go on in the discussion of,
Thank you.
okay.
We have, I think, 2 more options.
Okay, let's go through it. Let's finish.
So, in the discussion of any controversial issues in the classroom or in the course of professional duties, a teacher either may not express a personal opinion, or they may express a personal opinion, but shall identify it as such and must not express such an opinion for the purpose of persuading students to his or her point of view, and may only express a personal opinion after student discussion has concluded. So we can either say that teachers may not express a personal opinion, or they may do that, or they may do that, but only after students have had their discussion.
The current policy is the first option of the second options, right? So it's the may express a personal opinion, but shall identify it as such, and must not express such an opinion for the purpose of persuasion. That's both correct.
So here's something that I see as an issue, and that is, in our society, it's okay if we have, I hate to hold myself up to this, but it is the truth. If we have an opinion that is for something that is controversial, it tends to be regarded as okay, but if you have an opinion, say, about religion, it's not. So where do we draw the line? You know, are we better off just saying no opinions, or after the students have discussed it?
So
I guess,
I'll just go
do
with
we
the
get-
conversation here because
Yeah, it's
I like to
weird.
get everybody's here.
It's a sensitive thing.
So in my teacher hat, I would say, you know, a really good educator, which I have had many good educators in this district, but I had such a good educator, and I won't give them their name, but I did not know his position and he did a great job, and I still don't know the position, because he was such a good communicator on both sides, and very even keeled and charismatic, and I thank him every day for that. However, you know, you had a good point about once a person has a position, then they become an advocate for it, and they're, you know, that becomes popular when it's okay for them, but then, you know, they get scrutinized when it's not okay for others. So there's a double standard that's being introduced too often. And you made a perfect example about religion. It's unpopular to say that I'm a God-fearing Christian. However, I can make other claims and be, completely okay. So that's where, I don't know, I think that there should be some restraint at this point. We have an issue that people are, you know, they're not giving it, you know. I mean, that's really what we're kind of expressing here, that you can express your personal opinion, but you shouldn't be persuading the students. You know, that's where the statement has to come. That's where the discipline has to come from the position of authority over children. You have to be, you know, and I do like the end of it here. Teachers could give their opinion at the end of the discussion. I mean, that would be good, but we're giving the responsibility to the teacher. And obviously, we're having some issues. It's happening everywhere. I don't disagree that it's not happening everywhere.
And I see this too as, you know, like we're talking about good teachers in our own lives. Like when you look up to a teacher, and most teachers we look up to, even if we kind of disrespect them, there's still an influence on us. And I think that sometimes we just take on those adults' opinions who we're exposed to them, and our kids are with them every day. I don't know that that's what we want. You know, the idea is to give them all the points of view and to, you know, to educate them and let kids make up their own minds, but you can't ignore that our teachers have great influence over kids. And now I'm not saying that their opinions don't matter or shouldn't be taught or like, I don't know how I'm trying to say this, I think I'm struggling, but, it's just it can be very dangerous, like, as a teacher, giving your personal opinion about something, because you don't know how it's gonna be taken.
Well, it's very hard not to.
And it's hard not
Very-
to,
I mean, if you're passionate, you're in education because you're passionate about it, and
right?
you want to help as many children as possible. So, but this is supposed to be about controversial issues, and that's the problem.
Right.
That people are making things, you know, we have to get back to the basics of what we're trying to teach our kids, and it's to be prepared for the world, and there's many different things in the world, so that's a good point, you know? So I'm torn too.
Yeah,
Um,
and controversials are good to discuss, and you need all the sides. Sometimes there's not two sides. Maybe there's multifaceted, so you need all of that. But my concern is then when you have the influx of that one person's opinion, does that sway people one way or another? And we're not saying necessarily like something, you know what I mean? I don't know what side of something someone's got, but is that really fair? Tony, sorry, you've been waiting a long time, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I'm leaning towards that first one, and I agree with a lot of what you both just said, because, although I see the other side of saying, hey, let's let the teachers express their opinion after everyone's talked. You can't discount, how much influence teachers have over students, right? And I'm looking back at my own personal experience, in public schools when I was younger, and I had some great teachers, just like it sounds like Matt did, and I'm sure all of us did. And the thing I remember most was, they gave you thoughtful discussion on both sides, but you never knew what side they were on. They were just, here's the facts, right? And then you encourage the students to do the analysis and to do the critical thinking required to arrive at their own conclusions. And I think if we were to throw in their opinions at the end of that, it could, although it sounds like a reasonable thing to do, it could sway the student from making their own analysis and decisions. So I guess my thoughts are, stay neutral and present both sides, and encourage the students to do the thinking and arrive at their own conclusions. That's what my best teachers did, and I learned a lot from them. So that's my thoughts.
I think it's really important to note right now, because even talking about a policy of controversial issues can be controversial, and that this is just a discussion right now, and we're trying to look at all sides of it, because it is controversial, right? We're talking about controversial things. So it's important for anyone who watches this meeting to know that this is part of talking things through and hearing various opinions so that we can try to make the best decision for our kids. Having said that, Pam and Jason, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I always think of questions versus opinions, right?
Yeah.
And so the question that I keep playing through my head is, I hear everyone's opinion, and I agree with much of it. My question would be that the current policy is matches may express. And so the thing that keeps going through my head is, do we have an example where that got in the way of learning?
But I don't think it's the learning part, it's the indoctrinating and the persuade part.
Well, the fundamental purpose of this organization is learning.
Yes.
And so if we don't have multiple, right, we look for patterns in data. As mathematicians, that's what we do. And so if we don't have patterns and behaviors of our current policy, that is going against learning, then why would we change it? That's what I'm playing in my head.
Yeah.
Just that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you for the discussion. I mean, so will you agree that, that's not too big of a statement. I want to make sure my constituents, people on board for me, one, to make sure that we get to our basics of, we have children that are able to read at a high level and write at a high level and have math skills at a high level. And you gotta get back to the basics of that. And I understand that controversial issues can be presented, but they gotta be presented with both sides, which is great, that's what we want. It's just, I think we're getting off on a tangent. I understand you're saying with learning, we can learn about different perspectives, and that's good. It's just the influence that teachers have on children when they provide their personal opinions on that, it might cloud the judgment of the analysis of a critical problem solver for the child to make their own, and I think that would hinder them to be the best lifelong learner they can become. I agree with you a lot. We are having problems, so to short up, we are having problems.
I just want to be really cautious with how we approach that. Pam, do you have anything you want to add? Do you want to
I
not
guess
be
I-
adding?
Yeah, I mean, part of me is similar to Jason's saying, I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, what is the example in my head that would help me understand a situation where a teacher would do something, because earlier, like you said, Kathy, earlier in the policy, it specifically says the goal of sharing an opinion cannot be, that absolutely cannot be to indoctrinate or persuade to this particular point of view. So I'm thinking, well, if I'm following that, the only reason I would share my opinion is so that as a human person, I would appear to the students as having an opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kids ask, what do you think, right? And I share my opinion. That is the only way I could see that it would be an instructionally appropriate and not violate this.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at these two, I think about, should I not at all weigh in on anything like that? Or should I weigh in and follow the expectations that are in A, B, C, and D above?
Right.
Which I believe statement 2 is saying, and saying, maybe you should wait until the kids have all got their opinions out first. So that you're not, sometimes when a student says, hey Kathy, what do you think? And you're the second person in the room responding, you'd shut down any other student who might say, you know what, I think this, I think this, I think this. So it seems to me that that second statement is saying, make sure, right, I'm not gonna violate this, but I'm gonna say, this is strictly my opinion, right? You ask me, I'm just gonna share, this is solely my opinion about this. And I'm gonna wait till all the students are done. But I know that as an educator, and I think any good educator is gonna agree, we want that open-mindedness, and so there's not a sharing of my opinion to make sure students have to agree with my point of view, or have to come over to my side on an issue.
Right.
That's not what that's not what it would be about.
And the problem is we're having, I agree 100%, I do, right? It's just, we're having some issues with people not holding themselves accountable to that standard. I mean, that's the truth.
And I guess, Matthew, what I would say in that realm is, I'm wondering if that's something that's outside, like it's in the policy here that she
Not being
should.
followed.
So there's some other piece of this that has to be, separate from this policy, has to be addressed. This policy is talking about when topics are brought up that have those differing sides to them. How do we handle that in a classroom? And really, I look at it and say, in no way, shape, or form, however it's presented, should it do A, B, C, or D above. But the last part here is just talking about what's the teacher's role in the discussion of those topics. Do we want to say, teachers, you just need to understand and you need to explain to your students, I'm not going to weigh in at all. This is a student-to-student discussion. Or is it, you can weigh in, But when you weigh in, you need to expressly say to the students, this is solely my opinion. And when you weigh in and you say, this is solely my opinion, you wait till after all the students have done. Those are the three that I'm kind of seeing
Yeah,
here.
that's exactly it. And
Yeah.
I just think we're having issues within the district that people aren't abiding by these rules. They're presenting information, they're giving their opinion, and then they're persuading children. And I have a complaint today.
So I see this though, policy, like I totally get what you're saying, Pam. So to me, it's like having that policy in place, but then we need to communicate that policy again and say that, like say to teachers, look, we have this policy, please review this so that they understand like what is expected. Same thing like when we get the new cell phone policy for devices, like we have that reasonable expectation, right? That those who work in our district will abide by that, but will also make themselves aware of that policy. So if we're having issues with like enforcement of a policy, then we need to we need to address that, right? We need to like say, hey, everybody take a look at this and please make sure that you're following these policy guidelines, that this is important. We can't change that by the actual policy, so.
Yeah. So I would, I'm kind of, I guess I would be more leaning towards Pam that, the discussion has to be filled. And how we prove that is very hard, but the discussion has to be fulfilled, and then the teacher could give their opinion. I think that's a part of learning. It's good. It's just, once again, we're not fulfilling, there's holes, in which there's always going to be holes. I understand.
And I think too, if you say you don't express a personal opinion, where does that leave room for that relationship piece? I think that's really hard, when you, and I'm just, I guess I know we're just talking about controversial issues, but that's just hard. Like, you really have that communication going, you just kind of naturally have a back and forth, and they have to all of a sudden like be, oh, that's an opinion. Try to remind yourself of that. So I agree. Like I really see the way Pam's putting it, and I don't. It's good to have some opinion out there too from an adult. That's another way to think of this, right? Like to not just have, we're just getting opinions from other students, but then you have an adult who's teaching in the room that you should have an adult opinion too, not just kids. But it's about teaching and education.
Right, and I think it's Matthew's saying though, with that sense of the goal of sharing that is to be a human to those students.
Yeah.
But also to be very clear on, there are both sides. Sides are valid. Sides allow us to be open and think and be open-minded to multiple avenues, multiple perspectives. And so if I have a perspective, my perspective is valued and respected by everyone in the room as much as your perspective is and your perspective is. And so just teaching, how do we do that as adults, right? Eventually, all of our students will be in that realm of the adult world and have to navigate that. And so as teachers, role modeling that is what I heard Matthew say.
Well, and it's really ironic right now because we're talking about this and this is controversial, and we're actually doing that right now. We're all respecting one another's opinions and we're talking it through, but having that respect and having the ability to share our opinions and our ideas. And that can be, we can change our minds, but that's up to us, and it's about having that mutual respect for one another. And that's even what being a board is, right? Like if you need to be open-minded and willing to hear what other people have to say in order to move ahead and make the best decisions for, in this case, our district. So, but ironically, that's exactly what we're doing right now, is what we're saying we should allow teachers in our classrooms and how they should operate.
The only problem with that is when you infringe on one person's, expression, you still might be not controversial to a different opinion of a student. So
Right.
That's where we have to be more diligent about protecting all people.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be jumping, putting them into groups. We should be expressing, and that's where I'm kind of seeing, like, I mean, if I was a teacher, I'd still want to be able to give my opinion about certain things. It's just every opinion has to be um, considered to be the most important.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of it is.
I was thinking the same thing.
Because-
Taking into consideration.
Because that's the problem though.
Sorry.
Whoever speaks the loudest or yells the most seems to get the speakerphone at the time. You know, we have to remember that just because you don't agree with them, you know, you should still be honorable to them. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
And that's
Same.
that
Perfect.
that piece that goes beyond just the instructional piece. That's that how do we just help build some of the character and the civic mindedness of our students, right? How do you handle being a good citizen eventually?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Spot on.
The only thing I'll last thing is we have to be diligent about not infringing on those rights. So when we declare bullying or harassment, that's where I'm gonna kind of dive into it. Like, it's gotta be intent of damage. It can't be, you know, just somebody's opinion only. Like, it has to be proven that it's intentional. Because otherwise you're infringing on one person's rights to protect the others, and who's right. So that's where we have to do our due diligence about that. And that's not pertaining to this, so I'll stop talking about it, but Jason,
But
your
it kind
point.
of is, like, every scenario is so different, and that's what I just took from what you said. The same thing is to say may not express an opinion, personal opinion. Every scenario is so different, so if we make that blank statement, you know, it doesn't allow for adjusting to a classroom discussion and learning. So that's, I guess, how I would see it too, is to, you may express a personal opinion, but shall identify it as such, and may not express such an opinion for the purpose of persuading students to his or her view, and may only express a personal opinion after the student discussion is concluded. That's, I think, at this point, what would make me the most comfortable.
Me too, I don't want to compel the speech of my teachers,
Yeah.
even if I don't agree with it.
Tony, do you have something to add?
Yeah, you know, for me, you know, there's still just too much downside with that, and I'm not sure how much a teacher's opinion is going to add to, you know, on controversial issues is going to add to the students' long-term outcomes and growth. If it's that controversial, you know, I disagree with you guys. I don't see that as something that, you know, that I just don't, looking back at my own experience, I just don't recall a lot of my teachers weighing in on stuff like that. It was more facilitate discussion, but, you know, it wasn't necessarily, you know, adding their opinions into it.
Well,
So-
I think what we're saying is they can, they don't have to, right? But they're allowed to if it's pertinent and
Yeah. And I'm saying, I think there's downside to that, because I think that teachers may influence some independent thought and critical thinking, right? Or, you know, and maybe when I say influence it, maybe, you know, I just want these kids to arrive at their own conclusions based on information and data, and not necessarily to be, you know, we're trying to avoid indoctrination, right? And I'm not saying that's happening in our schools. I'm not saying that's happening with any teachers in our schools, but I know it's happening in our country. And I think to pretend it's not happening is doing a disservice, and we have to be aware of what's going on. So, again, my opinion, you know, I appreciate what you guys are saying, and I hear the other side. I just think the downside's too high. So, I disagree.
This would have us think about, in a lot of ways, Kathy, I think you have done that, and I think we are modeling the very thing that we would love to see in every classroom, like high level discussions, valuing others' opinions, listening, actively listening, and coming to conclusions on our own, being really vulnerable and able have the courage to express those opinions. And so if that's the truth, we're modeling that. Then I think our question is, which one of these statements best reflects the model that we're shooting for?
We're all adults, so that's the problem. So when you present information to a 5-year-old, they don't have that, structure built up in their head to be able to decide, more detailed or to have, so that's where I agree, as adults, that should happen, and we are modeling it very correctly. And I thank you for all your time. These are children. So that's where I would agree with Tony, we shouldn't be trying to, if it's a controversial issue, but, everything is gonna be controversial. I can contradict myself right now, which I am. Everything is gonna be controversial someday.
Yeah.
So that's where, we gotta look at it harder to understand that, these are moldable children, and we're trying to present them the right opportunity. So,
Yeah, can I add something real quick, guys?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to put this out there because I think it's relevant. But I had a few parents reach out to me on social media, and I haven't talked to them fully about this issue yet, but I think I'm mentioning this because it's relevant. And it sounds like there may have been a teacher in a summer school class that started talking about sexuality to 9-year-old children, right? And again, she's entitled to her opinion. I'm cool with her having her opinion. I just don't know how cool I am with her sharing that opinion with 9-year-old kids. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people in our district that would agree with that. And so again, I'm just thinking through what's the downside, right? And I hear what you guys are saying, and I don't think at times it's unreasonable. But the way the policy is written right now, it's going to potentially allow for conversations like that to happen that a lot of people would find, wouldn't be comfortable with. So all I'm suggesting is we have to consider the downside when we're making these policy decisions.
Jason?
Thank you for that, sharing that. I think of two things when I hear those two pieces. One is that letter A here really talks about the level of maturity, right? And to Matthew's point, 5-year-old, right? A controversial issue for a 5-year-old, more than likely very different than 17. And the second thing I wonder about, and our team can think about and talk about, is that if there are situations where there are questions or concerns, those are really personnel matters and really should be funneled to the principal and follow up and follow through with the appropriate help. And so I think our task here, and the discussion is wonderful, right? But our task here is to set the guidelines and allow personnel or HR to really think about those outlier situations.
Yeah, and I guess, when we're talking about, I have two things, Tony, to add to yours. One, all I think about when I'm hearing you is I want to know the rest of the story. There's got to be more than just that part of the story. Not now, by the way, but that makes me question that. Okay, what were the circumstances? How did this come up? What was said? Blah, blah, blah. There's going to be a lot more than just that. And then, what was I going to say for my second part? I forgot. I got all wrapped up in that
I
one.
forgot as well.
Yeah, sorry. But, yeah, so it was that, and, I don't know what the other part was, so.
I'll go off of that then. So, hypothetically, if I have a 10-year-old in class, after this, I don't know what the situation would be, but if a teacher proceeds to tell them that their religious belief is that they believe in Buddhism, and that's their opinion, and if we would say that would be an option for them, that might influence the child to maybe say that maybe they want to go after, they like that religion as well. Or if a teacher said that they were a Christian, then the student would have that as an opinion as well. So for one to say that we can't do it to none, that's a big step. And maybe at this point in time, maybe we do need to do that because of the influence that teachers have over children. However, in our policy presently, we are allowing it. So I guess we need to give direction to our district.
Yeah, I thought of the other part that I was gonna say earlier, and then
Thank
it was
you.
like, yeah,
I know.
you did help me. You took throw some pressure off my brain for a moment there. It was the fact that I kind of mentioned it before too. I'd be happy, even in that case of 9-year-olds, whatever it may be, what they're discussing, just that there was an adult present. And so we're not having 9-year-olds just make up, their ideas based on what other 9-year-olds have to say, that there's actually is a mature voice in the situation. So that I would appreciate. And then the other part is, even when you bring up Buddhism, I personally, I don't have a problem with stuff like that because I feel like, when our kids are young, that's when they should be exploring who they are. And when they find out the other things that are available, it really concretes who they are. They find out, that's part of exploration and discovery and learning. So like someone, like you said, might actually think that's controversial, but someone may not. So either way, we still have to decide what we're going to do with policy regarding controversial issues in the classroom. We're not deciding, I don't believe, what the controversial issues are, just how they will be handled. Jason?
I think I'd like to just kind of summarize what I think I'm hearing is that, I think Matthew brings a perfect example, right? Mm-hmm. And what I think we would see in most classrooms is the teacher saying, there are a lot of religions in our world, right? And if the timing was appropriate in the discussion, I am a practicing Buddhist. That's what it means to me. But there are many other religions. Mm-hmm. That's different to me than saying we should all be Buddhists.
Right.
And if that was the case, that's my point too. That's an
personality,
right? That's personality.
Yeah.
And then we direct that to the principal and folks.
Right. I agree.
Again, I think we're modeling, right?
Yeah.
Adults,
really
though, are the problem, with children, we're modeling it just, and especially, what proof, it's all gonna be verbal normally, 99% of the time. Johnny comes home and says, Mommy, this is what I was told that I could do today, and what do you think, Mommy? And then they hear a different, a 9-year-old version of it, so.
Right. It's hard when you're taking it out of context, right? But it's part of the teacher's job is to help students through getting to the point where they can do this and have that conversation and have that respect for one another and listen to other points of view.
But to Tony's point, the maturity level of it is discretionary to the teacher. So, that's where personnel, if you talk to a couple 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds about something that, that's great. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of wiggle room there. So there's really no accountability to what is right and wrong, except to the teacher's opinion, compared to the parents or the community or myself.
I don't know.
So that's why I'm circling back. And he has a good point. If you just abstain from your which we referred back to my educator that I couple obviously, but I did not know his political affiliation. Even to this day, I don't know, because he presented it such evenly.
Or you think you don't know.
Yeah. Maybe I don't.
He may have told you, but in a way that you didn't know you were actually learning it by saying, this is my opinion. It's really hard to say.
Tony, did you have any? No?
All right, well, I don't know that, where are we right now?
I don't have a good answer, to be honest with you.
Okay. Do we just?
I also don't think we need to feel obligated to finish this tonight, right? We're having a great discussion.
Yeah.
We can put this back on the agenda in July when we meet again.
Sure.
It gives us time to step away and think about some things. These are fruitful discussions, whether we have a solution or an endpoint.
Yeah.
So
I don't feel like I agree. I don't feel like we have to, it would have been great if we could have check boxes because we were all in agreement, but I think the fact that we've had this great discussion. I don't know about you guys, but it's a lot swimming around upstairs right now in my brain. So I would appreciate being able to walk away from this at this point in time and coming back to it again, if everyone else is okay with that. So I don't know how Matthew and Tony, how you feel. I'm willing to do it if you want to keep talking, but I really would not mind.
That's all about, there's
Yeah,
no
we have
more.
one more box, and maybe we can get through that.
We can try. Sure.
I think this one's a little more straight.
Okay, so we'll try. We'll give it a whirl then, okay?
We also have to celebrate our successes, right? We did get through 2 book adoptions,
You did great.
an out-of-state travel, AGR,
Four
or
policies.
4 policies. So,
Absolutely.
again, there's.
And we've had a
value
great
That's
discussion.
right.
So, yeah. Okay, well, let's just go for it then. Last paragraph that I'm going to read. Teachers should be mindful that this does not permit them to offer opinions on topics which would not be the subject of a discussion in the classroom due to their appropriateness for the age or ages of the students involved. As always, teachers are expected to serve as exemplars for their students by demonstrating good judgment as professionals when discussing controversial issues and expressing personal opinion in the classroom. Our one option to check is the classroom should not be used as a forum for the discussion of district employment issues. Oh, that's to me really obvious.
What would?
That came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
The classroom
Where is that?
should not be used as a forum for the discussion of district employment issues. Well, to me, that's a dumb moment, but
The only piece that I could think that would go against this
yeah,
is if there was a discussion about labor shortage and someone was saying, well, yeah, our district has some difficulties securing professionals, but I don't know if that,
but would that be controversial?
I don't think so.
Because this is
That's
relating
the-
to controversy.
right. That's the only thing I.
So I would be fine with checking this because again, to me, it's relating to controversy. So
Yeah.
they shouldn't be talking to students about controversial issues within the district for employment. That's
okay,
just-
here's where it's pertaining.
Is it?
Is if a teacher advocates to students to talk about the employment of a staff member, that's where it would become pertaining to. That's an example, I think, of if a teacher presents information about another teacher and the employment of that teacher, that's where, I guess, that's where
But they
it
shouldn't
pertains.
do that.
They shouldn't be doing that.
No, that's what I'm saying, like,
I'm just telling you when it would become.
Would be one, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of times where it could occur and it would be an issue, right? And that's the
But this
only
is about
time I
issues.
can think of is like on leadership, but I don't think it's.
But that's not
It'd be a
controversial.
stretch to get a connection,
That's what
that would be instructionally
Right.
relevant, I think. I can't think of a scenario in my head really.
Where it's controversial.
I think this is.
Like,
Yeah,
again, it's relating to
yeah.
controversy, not like the shortage of teachers. kind of
That's
thing.
simple. Let's add it.
Okay.
Let's see if-
Are you good with that too, Tony?
Yeah, so are you saying to leave that part in, that sentence,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I agree with that.
Second. Ooh, that one was fast. Good thing you had us keep going.
So I guess what I would have is, can we table, but I'm sorry, I don't want to, I'm saying, can we have a few different versions of, kind of come back before our next meeting? We kind of charge people to try to write different versions of it, for the controversial. Like you, Jason, pertain and say, Matt, if you have any ideas, I'll write something, and Tony has something, Dan has something, if you have something, we kind of bring it together.
Kind of like add-ons kind of thing, like
Yeah.
almost like an addendum kind of thing.
Well, it wouldn't be an intent because this is a input, but
Yeah.
it would be something that we
Um,
would want to change within this to try to address the holes that we already have found.
Something that, like brainstorming, and then I think we talked about the process would be then, if we agree, to take a look at those additions as possible, I think
Yep.
the next step would be some legal authority,
Yep.
right, to review it, to make
Just review
sure.
it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm just thinking for myself, I don't know what I come up with.
That's fine. I'm-
I'm just like,
But you're
So-
suggesting if you have some ideas, bring it to the next.
Yeah.
meeting.
Including
We'll
you.
discuss it.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
including
absolutely.
you is what I'm trying to say, because,
You know, it might also be interesting to see if Jim would have some
Yeah.
guidance with this or ideas too.
Yeah.
I don't think that would necessarily be a bad thing.
And then
Yeah, I like that.
about the express of the personal opinion, we can, you know, survey, or we can let teachers email us or personal opinions, and if they feel that that's something that they need to have, we can hear that before the next meeting, you know, within their emails to us, and we can address it through our conversation, and then we can circle back and see if we really, either way we want to go. But I think there's some time to let the community digest that too, or the staff, to give us their opinions, so we can be advocates for them as well.
Yeah,
We'll have these pieces reflected in the minutes, right, that we had discussions, great discussions.
Yeah.
We're still considering the first, those two options that we did not finalize. And we did make a recommendation on the last one.
Yeah.
We are going to think about if we want to make additions, and we'd seek counsel after that, after discussion. That'll all be in the minutes, so that.
Yeah,
that'll be great.
That's all.
You know, one thing I just wanted to add, that this is dangerous when I keep saying I need to add, spend time, but I thought of this several times as we've been talking about this. You know, part of this is having confidence in the people that we hired and are working in this district. And, you know, I have that, and I want to have that, and that's part of why I'm good with saying, let them express their opinions. Are those going to be different than my own sometimes? Yeah, of course, but I'm okay with that. That doesn't mean we can't address it either, you know, so I just wanted to add that,
Thank you.
All right, so is there anything else you guys want to add before we adjourn our meeting? Or try to adjourn our meeting? I guess it's up to you if we get to adjourn our meeting.
I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for the discussion tonight. I thought it was very, very productive, and I thought it was good.
Yeah,
So thank you.
same here, I'll ditto that. Yeah, thank you, Tony.
Start without a headache
Pam
and
and
end with a
Jason.
headache.
I just want to make sure that we summarize the next steps on all these real quick.
Okay,
So we will make, the math application booklet option will be in the minutes. But we'll make the book available in the front office, and we'll do something on the website.
Yeah, I will.
that would be great,
That's
yes.
fine.
And that really, the approval piece of this is really approving for that next step,
Right.
because after the 30 days, that recommendation would have to come back to say, are we all right now with moving the formal adoption of the book to the board?
Yeah,
Just a little bit of
it
a,
comes back to us again.
yeah,
What I want to make
Based
sure,
on-
yep, I understand that that's the procedure, but I want to add to that procedure by identifying an update to textbooks on our website so that parents can actually see it on their website, which is posted, so that they can dive into it more than just listening to the minutes.
And it might be something we have to work towards.
I know
Yeah.
that's not easy as I say it is, but I just, that would be very useful for future
Yeah,
things. So if we start with this is good.
Accounting one, ditto, right, doing the same
Yes.
thing. Out-of-state travel, we're bringing it to the full board with approval from curriculum committee, seeking approval from the full board, right? AGR is no approval, just discussion, be in the minutes. The first 4 policies, we will offer the current, the template, and then our recommendation, and then we'll summarize our conversation on the confirmation. That's the summary.
awesome. You've accomplished a lot, and sooner than I actually expected to.
Told my wife to be over in that.
Although you were on point, when you said that. I told John it'd be at least 3 hours. I think I made it. I made that too. So, all right, well, guys, thank you so much. I think, are we good? Yeah. I just want to make sure no one has anything to add. Are we all good?
We're good.
All right, then I would like to take a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Note that it is 8:21 and our curriculum committee has been adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been an excellent-
Thanks, guys. Good night. See ya.
Yeah,
Thank
take
you very
care,
much.
Tony.
Yeah, sorry for the technical difficulties, but it was my breaking in on Google Meets, but I think I figured it out. So thanks.
You got it. You were here.
Glad you could
That's the
join
best
us.
part.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
And You guys got through all this too, congratulations.
Thank you for being here. You're welcome.
Warm.
Open that door and I'm like, whew.